Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, candidates. Hugh Hewitt inside the ReliefFactor.com studio inside the Beltway. Best news of the morning. The coronavirus vaccine has begun to be distributed to the public at large in Great Britain. It's not the first people to have received it. Thousands of people have received it. Thousands of people have received the Moderna vaccine. Thousands have received the AstraZeneca vaccine. Thousands have received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. But the key thing is this is the public getting it. And when the public gets it, everybody gets happy because that means it will eventually get to you. There are 20 million doses in the United States, enough for 20 million people by the end of December. So our hospital workers and our nurses and our frontline responders and many of the elderly in our retirement homes and communities will be vaccinated in December. Congratulations, Operation Warp Speed. From the top, Donald Trump, down to the delivery man and the nurse or the assistant in the nursing home is delivering the jabs, as they say. The second person to receive the jab in Great Britain was named William Shakespeare. I'm not making that up. One person on social media, according to the Washington Post, asked if Keenan was patient number one. If Keenan was patient 1A, then was Shakespeare patient 2B or not to be? How about that? That's pretty awful. Let's check the Weather Center. This is the signal for the Weather Center in the Hugh Hewitt Show, the brand new Weather Center hosted by Dwayne himself. Where's the whiteboard?
It is not here.
It's not there?
No.
The Weather Center's not up and running?
No, I actually did one of the few sporting activities still legal in this state.
So you didn't do a whiteboard?
I went golfing yesterday. Instead of going to a store and waiting to get
matter
in
of
line to
interpretation.
a store to wait to be one of 5 people allowed into the store at a time to buy a whiteboard.
Well, we're not able to bring the people the weather that you said we were set up and ready to go. Okay, never mind. I was going to promote the after show. I was going to promote the after show and tell people.
Well, then promote the after show.
The universe is available.
I don't
people
spend
want
any
to watch
time
it.
on the weather on the after show.
Well, you've got to. People are going to expect the Weather Center to provide the weather. The best gift for Christmas is a membership in the Universe. Universe.com gets you an hour of Dwayne, Grumpy Dwayne, a day at 8 p.m. in the West, in the East, 5 p.m. in the West.
Yes.
And that's Grumpy Dwayne right there. Thank you, Grumpy Dwayne. Go back, Eeyore, otherwise known as the Weatherman. He took the Weatherman meteorologist at night school, and it was wonderful. Now, the news of the day is beyond the rollout. Boris Johnson has got a great victory at home with the coronavirus vaccine, which was produced in the United States, but who's counting? He is off to Brussels to seek the way out of the Brexit stalemate because they got to get a deal by Thursday or there's going to be a hard Brexit. So he is flying off in the hopes of making sure there isn't a hard Brexit. Meanwhile, President-elect Biden has made 2 nominations. He's nominated retired General Lloyd Austin, although it's not official yet. It's widely leaked, and so it's trial balloon. General Lloyd Austin, like General Mattis before him, was the chief of U.S. Central Command, which oversees all Middle East combat operations. So he was third in the line of command before. So now he'll be second in the line of command. President, Secretary of Defense, combatant commanders. So, and there are 5 combatant commanders. Maybe there's 6 now, I'm not sure. But there are 5 at least, and General Lloyd Austin was one of them. In the era of the withdrawal from Iraq, which was a disaster, but that is not his fault. He was ordered to do it. He got it done. It was a pretty logistically challenging exit from Iraq, which led to the rise of ISIS, but that was not his call. That was Barack Obama's call, and for which he will always be remembered as the enabler of the rise of ISIS. But General Austin is a fine, fine general. And General Mattis did a job that was certainly applauded by many and criticized by a few, but he knew what he was doing. He knew the building, and General Austin will know the Pentagon. So he is also African American, so he'll be the first black Pentagon chief. He's 67 years old. He's the right age. He's been around. He knows what he's doing. Still has all of his energy. He will require a waiver, just as General Mattis got a waiver, because there's a bar on former military officers within 7 years of their retirement, becoming the Secretary of Defense, and he is between 4 and 5 years since his retirement. Key thing to know, he's a personal friend of Joe Biden. Joe Biden went to his retirement ceremony. So the president-elect knows his Secretary of Defense. That is good. The second nominee is more problematic. Javier Becerra. Now, I've known Javier Becerra for a long time. He used to appear on my Los Angeles television show, Life and Times, when he was, I think, a member of the Assembly before he went to Congress and before he came back and became the Attorney General of California, appointed to that job, subsequently elected. Now he's going to be appointed to HHS. And the Wall Street Journal opines this is identity health care. I'm not sure. Javier Becerra has been very hard on the pro-life people, forcing them unconstitutionally to post abortion availability notices in their offices, for which he was rebuked by the Supreme Court. According to the Journal, he has no expertise in how drug and insurance market functions. He is lost on healthcare issues repeatedly, and he is, he's a supporter of the Obamacare, but it's just unclear what this is other than identity politics, because he is, of course, Latino. And we will see what happens. I think thus far, among all the nominees, he's the second weakest in terms of political support. I like him, by the way. I like Neera Tanden, who's the weakest in terms of political support. But I don't know. Usually there's at least one. Sometimes there are two confirmation scalps taken by the other party. Andy Puzder was the one taken by the Democrats when Donald Trump came in. Now we have two candidates for that. Javier Becerra might be it, or Neera Tanden might be it. I don't know. I generally defer to the president, who's been, I think they ought to be allowed to staff up any way they want. And then people will vote on their policies in 2 years. There's also a Washington Post story on the GOP's record-breaking success, reflecting a major shift on recruiting, supporting female candidates. That's pretty terrific, too. Ross Douthat has a column in the New York Times blasting the Becerra choice, by the way, if you want to go read that. And the Financial Times has a story on the provocateur driving China's wolf warrior pack. The most outrageous comments come from one guy. I just remind people, he's just a mouthpiece for General Secretary Xi. Don't be confused. He's not out there freelancing. Now, I want to play for you. I've played it a few times. Raphael Warnock wants to be the senator from Georgia. He's a radical. He's the most radical major party nominee with a chance to win that I can remember. He is hard left. He's not socialist. He's beyond socialist. He's just hard left on everything. And Raphael Warnock is a pastor, so he preached, and some people have his sermons in it. That's fine. There's no religious bar on being a preacher, but what you preach about matters. Here's what he said about the military. Can we find that and play that, please? Because I want to give a... Go ahead.
Nobody can serve God and the military.
So can you play that again? He says, I'll slow it down. Nobody can serve God and the military. Play it again.
America, nobody can serve God and the military.
So he's addressing the entire country again, America, and here's what he says. One more time.
America, nobody can serve God and the military.
So the New York Times rushed to his defense last night in a story that said, no one can serve God in the military is a theme that has roots in biblical passages. That's a quote. Now that would be a surprise to King David, right? That no one can serve God in the military. Peter Beinart, man on the left, who I've known for a long time, like Peter, we've debated a few times, fired back on Twitter. You mean King David, who wasn't allowed to build the temple because he had shed blood? To which I replied, so are you saying King David did not serve God? Run with that, Peter. To which he replied, of course he served God, just saying there's a recognition, at least in Jewish tradition, of the tension between his militarism and the requirements of holiness. Now, I told him, look, I don't know what's in Jewish tradition. I know that a whole bunch of men of God and women of God have served in the military from the beginning of time and in Scripture. But they're not backing down and they're saying it's not radical. I would just like to know what Georgians and others, if you're a pastor, is it possible to serve God in the military if you're a soldier who's a believer? Because Raphael Warnock says no, and I say yes, and it's a big issue in Georgia. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for Townhall.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom has repeatedly called on Californians to come together and make sacrifices to fight COVID-19. The request would have been better received if, at the same time, Governor Newsom wasn't off violating his own public health guidance by dining with a group of lobbyists at one of America's most posh restaurants, or sending his kids to a Sacramento private school in person while many California schools remain closed for in-person learning and millions of students slog their way through online classes. The problem with Newsom's hypocritical actions is that they undercut the very healthcare professionals and scientists whose advice he is asking Californians to follow. It makes those of us who live in California wonder who we can trust and what guidance we should be listening to. At a time when we need leadership and clarity, Newsom has given us hypocrisy and confusion. California's voters won't soon forget his shortcomings. I'm Lan-Hee Chen.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, impacting policy decisions today, preparing public leaders for tomorrow. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Hi there, it's Hugh Hewitt for Angel Tree. Let me ask you to think about a child waking up on Christmas without a present underneath their tree. Indeed, there might not be a tree there at all. That's what happens to 2.5 million children who have one or both parents in prison every single year. Angel Tree steps forward and for $220 can provide 10 of those children with a present, with a Christmas, and with a gospel message. So I'm partnering with Angel Tree this year, and if you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top you'll find the Angel Tree banner to make sure that those children, as many of them as possible, get some love at Christmas, some grace of the season, the proclamation of the word, for unto him a child is born. That is what Prison Fellowship through Angel Tree does. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can. $220 gift gives those gifts that Christmas to 10 different children. And thank you. Merry Christmas.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
People are fuming. Those who believe that Donald Trump is right, that the election was stolen, are angry at Bill Barr because they claim that he said there was no evidence. He didn't say there was no evidence. He said he's not seen any widespread evidence of voter fraud yet. This is a man who's had the president's back from day one. He did the summary of the Mueller probe, suggested that the president had been vindicated. He even used the word spy that the president has used and said his campaign was in fact spied on. He was reamed by the left for that. And in early last month, he sent out a directive. Let me read part of it for you, because this really infuriated the left, infuriated CNN, infuriated the New York Times, infuriated MSNBC. Hee-haw. And he said in this memo, probe voting irregularities. Normal protocol is to wait until the election has been certified. He said, no, don't wait. You hear any substantial allegations of fraud, pursue them now, to the point where the official who's normally in charge of investigating voter fraud resigned. He was so angry. And here's what the New York Times said. Attorney General William Barr, wading into President Trump's unfounded accusations of widespread irregularities, told federal prosecutors on Monday they were allowed to investigate specific allegations of voter fraud before the results of the presidential race are certified. Barr's authorization prompted the DOJ official who oversees investigations of voter fraud, Roger Pilger, to step down from the post within hours, angry over the change in protocol.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And I take you back to March of this year, when David Plouffe, Obama's former campaign manager, wrote a book called The Citizen's Guide to Defeating Donald Trump. And in it, everybody could see this, but he wrote on page 81, this election will come down to a
Welcome back, America. That line, has ever that made more sense to you? Next year, all our troubles will be out of sight. Alex Azar on Fox and Friends yesterday, cut number 9.
Well, we are getting ready for possible rollouts of vaccine within days, and that's why tomorrow afternoon President Trump is hosting a vaccine distribution summit with many of our governors, our retail pharmacy chains, and our distributors like McKesson, FedEx, and UPS to be very transparent and show the world how comprehensively we have planned out every aspect of this distribution. And we hope that if everything goes well, we could be seeing the Pfizer vaccine distributed within days and the Moderna vaccine distributed within days after their hearing a week from Thursday.
So it's going to roll out across the United States, and this is great news. What we also need, though, is economic recovery. The vaccines will roll out through the United States. We'll save millions of lives. We'll all get inoculated. We will push this. It's very safe. It's got to be done, or otherwise other people will get sick. You'll get sick. Lots of people die from this, and that will be unnecessary. Everyone's got to get vaccinated. But we also need economic recovery, and Mitch McConnell is willing to make a comprehensive deal that renews PPP, some unemployment insurance, and provides liability protection for American business so they don't get aid on one hand and get sued by plaintiffs' lawyers on the other. And Mitch McConnell went to the Senate floor yesterday and spoke about Nancy Pelosi and Democratic brinksmanship, cut number 6.
We've reached a time of year when the Senate has more important outstanding business than we have days to complete it. Delivering for the American people will take focus, dexterity, and genuine bipartisanship. On government funding, as I've said for weeks, it's my hope that our committee's work will bear fruit and a full-year funding package will come to the floor in both chambers. I anticipate that the Senate will take up a one-week extension this week so the government does not close on December the 11th, and work can continue through the end of next week. The nation needs our Democratic colleagues to resist the temptation to play brinksmanship with long-settled policy issues or push poison pill riders that they know would tank the process. We also expect to receive and pass a conference report on the annual defense authorization, and we need to continue confirming impressive nominees to vacancies in the judiciary and the executive branch. We senators are no strangers to end-of-year drama. By this time, mistakes are far higher. We're up against another, even steeper surge in COVID-19 than we saw back in the spring. Workers and small businesses are once again struggling to make ends meet as states and localities step up precautions.
Now, we need that bill, and Democrats are obstructing it. We need liability reform. We also need clarity on the Georgia Senate race. We got to keep Mitch McConnell in charge rather than sending the radical Raphael Warnock and the lightweight, hard left John Ossoff to the Senate. We got to send David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Now, I played for you the quote. Play it again. This is Raphael Warnock in the pulpit, cut number 4.
America, nobody can serve God and the military.
Josh in Dallas, is that true?
Quite frankly, Hugh, no, because throughout Scripture there's a concept called the day of the Lord. And in the Holy Bible, when it speaks about the day of the Lord, God is talking about this future day when the Messiah will come and wage war. This is in the Holy Scripture. Wage war with the unrighteous, you can say, on this earth. So synonymously, when you talk about war and when you speak of God, it's all throughout the Holy Bible.
Yeah, wasn't David a warrior king?
He definitely was.
And Saul?
At the age of around 13, David was already battling in war against Goliath.
And all the judges led people into battle. It's the craziest thing that Peter Beinart said, that there's a tension in Jewish tradition between military service and holiness. And I just do not believe that. I think he's confusing the murder that David arranged with his military service. But Peter, he can speak for himself. Thank you, Josh. 1-800-520-1234. What do you think about the radical Warnock statement on God, military service? Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Why, if these machines are capable of fraud, we have not had machines in the past that are capable of fraud. If suddenly we have the existence of machines that can be used in various ways to disenfranchise voters, what more do we need to say?
What I find, I think, creepy and a little dispiriting about all this is that, see, in general, I think, Eric, you would agree with me that conspiracies are very hard to pull off, particularly when they involve a large number of people. If three guys are conspiring, they can maybe make some sort of omerta vow of silence to each other. But on the other hand, if you have hundreds of people involved. Now, when you look at the testimony in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, in Michigan, there's a kind of chilling similarity as to the shenanigans that are going on. They're kind of the same shenanigans in all these places. And that means that there has to be some form of central coordination. Just as with the deep state, when you see Clapper and Comey and Brennan and Strzok and Page all going off on expeditions, you realize someone must have directed it. These guys would not have done it on their own. So here's the point, that the only people in a position to crack this is the FBI. Because once you're able to find that there were people who were in on it, they're going to be very quick to tell you who told them to do it. But somebody with authority and somebody who has the power of subpoena and the power of indictment needs to be able to go up to these people and go, listen, it's going to be 10 years in prison if you're convicted of lying, or if you don't reveal who it was that made you do this. That seems not to be happening.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon He-Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom has repeatedly called on Californians to come together and make sacrifices to fight COVID-19. The request would have been better received if, at the same time, Governor Newsom wasn't off violating his own public health guidance by dining with a group of lobbyists at one of America's most posh restaurants, or sending his kids to a Sacramento private school in person while many California schools remain closed for in-person learning and millions of students slog their way through online classes. The problem with Newsom's hypocritical actions is that they undercut the very healthcare professionals and scientists whose advice he is asking Californians to follow. It makes those of us who live in California wonder who we can trust and what guidance we should be listening to. At a time when we need leadership and clarity, Newsom has given us hypocrisy and confusion. California's voters won't soon forget his shortcomings. I'm Lon He-Chen.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, impacting policy decisions today, preparing public leaders for tomorrow. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Hi there, it's Hugh Hewitt for Angel Tree. Let me ask you to think about a child waking up on Christmas without a present underneath their tree. Indeed, there might not be a tree there at all. That's what happens to 2.5 million children who have one or both parents in prison every single year. Angel Tree steps forward and for $220 can provide 10 of those children with a present, with a Christmas, and with a gospel message. So I'm partnering with Angel Tree this year, and if you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top you'll find the Angel Tree banner to make sure that those children, as many of them as possible, get some love at Christmas, some grace of the season, the proclamation of the word, for unto him a child is born. That is what Prison Fellowship through Angel Tree does. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can. $220 gift gives those gifts at Christmas to 10 different children. And thank you. Merry Christmas.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Wokeness tends to be, in my experience, an upper middle class Caucasian phenomenon. If you look at positions on where trans prisoners should be housed or political correctness in speech and so on. So I've been lucky enough as a black guy in the Upper South to escape a lot of that, which is something I'm fairly glad for in terms of day-to-day life.
Very good. So now let's go to 1619, subject of your video. So the New York Times published this thing, which basically said, tell me if I have it correctly, and I have no issue with being corrected, that America was not really founded in 1776, but in 1619 when the first slaves came to the colonies, and it has been systemically racist ever since. We fought the American Revolution basically to keep slavery alive. Is that a fair synopsis?
Yeah, the 1619 Project's declared goal was centering slavery at, I believe their term was the very core of the American experience, and actually challenging the original founding date of the country. I mean, their materials very explicitly read, what if we imagine this was 1619? That's the date the first slaves arrived, and not 1776. Reality is much more complex, of course, than 1619's interpretations, which
Right,
is...
hold it there, please, Professor, because I must...
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. This carol commemorates Herod's ordering of his soldiers to slaughter innocents. So certainly military power has been associated with genocide and with terror and with mass killing, but there is no necessary contradiction between serving God and the military. In fact, the people who liberated the death camps were military. So I'm going to talk in the next, in third hour with Howard Mortman about some of the American rabbis who've opened Congress who also served in the military. It's an amazing story that Howard has written. But when Raphael Warnock said this, cut number 4,
America, nobody can serve God and the military.
Obviously, it opened up a huge gash in Georgia, which is a very pro-military state with a lot of bases. And obviously, Kelly Loeffler, his opponent, is going to draw attention to that radical statement. So the New York Times attempted to cover for him last night and said that, I'm paraphrasing here, I've got it around somewhere, that has tradition as biblical roots. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's just the New York Times. They said, quote, is a theme that has roots in biblical passages. A theme, no, it's not, it's a quote, that has roots. In other words, roots? What verses are you talking about? In biblical passages. Now, I don't know what their argument is, but I called for a fact checker, and Peter Byron arrived and said, oh, no, wait a minute. King David wasn't allowed to build the temple because he had shed blood. And I believe that refers to the murder, not the military service of King David, who clearly was a hero and the epitome of kingship in the Old Testament. But I open up to you. What do you think? David in Louisville.
I've got 4 specific New Testament passages concerning service in the military and to God. Luke 3:14. And the soldiers likewise demanded of him, saying, and what shall we do? And he said unto them, do violence to no man, neither accuse any falsely, and be content with your wages. Matthew chapter 8, the centurion had a sick servant, came to Jesus, and Jesus said he would come and heal the servant, and the centurion, who is a Roman officer, said that he's not worthy for Jesus to come, but as an officer he gives orders, and that he believed if Jesus gave the order that his servant would be healed, and Jesus said that he had not seen such great faith anywhere in Israel. Matthew 27:54. Now when the centurion and they that were with him watching Jesus saw the earthquake and those things that were done, they feared greatly, saying, truly this was the Son of God. Those were the first believers after the crucifixion. Acts chapter 10, verse 1. There was a certain man in Caesarea named Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band, a man and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people and prayed to God always. But I'll tell you, you definitely cannot serve God and the Democratic Party.
Oh, stop, David. I just answered that yes, you can. There are lots of Democrats who are God-fearing, but I will ask you this. Isn't King David a soldier?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, my friend. That was eloquent and on point. I just say King David's the easiest one. David in Bakersfield, California. What do you think, David?
That Raphael feller, you had to pay attention to the 9th commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness. I was in the Marine Corps. I served my God, and I serve my country. George Washington had two mottos that he lived by: deeds, not words. And the second one was for my God and for my country.
David, well said. Thanks for your service. Mark in Washington, D.C. What do you say, Mark?
Hey, morning glory, Hugh.
Morning glory.
So I'm going to take off. Peter Beinart, I believe, insulted my religion with his comments on Twitter last night. For those of your listeners who aren't familiar, when Jews pray on a Saturday, there's a scripture reading, and it's done so that you read the whole 5 books of Moses once in weekly chunks throughout the year. One of those chunks from the book of Deuteronomy is entitled When You Go Out to War, and it's one of the first ever recorded codes of ethical conduct in war given in Scripture by God to Moses. And every believing Jew would believe that there is an ethical way to conduct yourself in war.
Oh, I didn't know that. So Peter Beinart coming off with David, there's a tension in Judaism between military service and worshiping God. That's just nonsense?
That's Peter Beinart defining Judaism as what Peter Beinart believes. You can go throughout the major book of rabbinic thought that forms the basis of modern Judaism, the Talmud, and they talk about the need for righteous wars, the need to fight to defend yourself, and what the rules that apply to that are and what the rules that apply to that are not. And so for him to say that there's a tension in Judaism between military service and honoring God exists only in Peter Beinart's mind.
I believe that to be true. I do think they're very defensive about Raphael Warnock because that is a deeply offensive comment that you cannot serve God in the military. I know a lot of faith-based soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. I know a lot of them.
No, absolutely. So I was more personally exercised about Peter Beinart's tweet to you than I was about anything that the Senate candidate said.
Okay.
I have every confidence that Senator Loeffler will be returned to the Senate.
Well said, Mark. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate that. Mike in Pennsylvania. Hey, Mike.
Hey, listen, I served many years in the Marine Corps. I also serve in the church. And the Bible says, yes, that God did say that David was a bloody man. But he also said that he's a man after God's own heart.
Yep. David is the complete practical and I think widely understood repudiation of Pastor Warnock and Peter Beinart's assessment. Thank you, my friend. Let me give you an update on the market. Brought to you by Birch Gold. I am encouraging everyone to buy gold this Christmas because given the way the market is, it's the gift that will give on stability. If you have got an IRA or a 401k, a portion of it ought to be invested in physical precious metals, and Birch Gold will help you do that. All you have to do is go to hughgold.com, hughgold.com, and they'll send you a free information kit, or you can text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747, and they'll be right back to you with the same free information kit. And they sell gold, and when they buy gold, they'll also throw in some free silver dollars, which are great stocking stuffers. But the key thing are the American Eagles and the Canadian Maple Leafs that your children or your family can put away in a safety deposit box against all future ups and downs in the economy. It just never loses all of its value. It usually just goes up. Gold this morning is at 1,865. Remember last week it was 1,790 or something like that. I last bought it at close to $2,000, and I have no regrets because it's not for buying and selling, it's for keeping. And what you need to do is get some gold and make sure that you have a diversified savings account. Birch Gold brings you this market report. It was a mixed day on the market yesterday. The Dow was down 148. The NASDAQ, as I predicted on this show yesterday, was up 55 because the high-tech stuff and the online stuff is going to survive the pandemic just fine. It's some of the old companies that are hurting. But overseas this morning, everything is red. They're afraid of a hard Brexit. They're afraid that Boris Johnson and his EU counterpart cannot pull it out. And the world is worried about that, and they're worried about coronavirus spiking everywhere. Can the supply of the vaccine catch up quickly? There is the National Defense Act, and Trump can take over Pfizer if he needs to and direct all that wherever it ought to go. I don't think he's going to have to do that, but he could do that. There will be a vaccine summit today, and we'll see what comes out of the vaccine summit. But hopefully the market turns around later in the day. Let me also appeal to you about our friends over at Prison Fellowship, and I just want you to focus for a moment on the children who don't have mom or dad at home because they are in prison, and they've been there for a number of years. And it takes a lot of work by Angel Tree, a Ministry of Prison Fellowship, to bring together more than 300,000 children and their parents. And they work with the parents who are in prison, and they work with the parent or guardian who's at home to make sure that the parent in prison knows what the child wants. And then, with your donations, they go and find a present for that child that is age appropriate and appropriate for the father or the mother to send from behind bars. And they put a note in it, and they connect those kids. They also put in a Bible, English and Spanish, and they deliver it. That helps enormously. You heard Michael on this show yesterday talking about Angel Tree has been with him for his years of growing up and how special it is. Here's a volunteer on the Angel Tree distribution side from Dawn from Dallas, who knows that every donation, large or small, is important and has the potential to literally change the life of a child.
Personalize that. The little bit that you give, if we all give something, we are better together. If every single one right now, even if you are impacted in some stretch, the more that you give, the more you receive. I always say you can't outgive God. So you give without knowing where it's going to go. Just pay it forward and see the results, see the blessings that God will bring back into your life.
And the blessings it brings to those children are immense. And the big trouble this year, I've said it before, you probably heard me say it, is that Angel Tree is a patio ministry, meaning that people come out of church, they've heard a great sermon, they see the Angel Tree, and they say, I'm going to give of my, even of my need. I'm going to give the widow's mite, or I'm going to give out of my surplus. I'm going to give a big gift. I'm going to give the best gift I can. And they write a check to Prison Fellowship, or they take a name off of a tree, or they do that. Well, all those church patios are either working, there aren't donuts to be had, there are no Christmas tree bake sales. There's just nothing happening this year because of the virus. It'll be back next year. But this is the year where Angel Tree really needs you. And so if you go to hughhewitt.com and just go to the top, you'll find the Angel Tree banner. Please be as generous as possible, please. This is the year. Just imagine those children not getting a present. It would, and a note from mom or dad. Eric in Houston, what do you think about Pastor Raphael Warnock's comments on the military, Eric?
Yeah, it's great to talk with you this morning.
Thank you.
You said you can't serve God and the military, right? Of course you can. David slew Goliath, whose forces were against God. Saul disobeyed God on the battlefield. The Roman centurion displayed great faith, which amazed Jesus, and Jesus said, whosoever believes shall not perish. And then there's me. I served the Marine Corps over 10 years, sought, learn, and serve God for my 60 years of life to this date. So I don't know what he's actually saying.
I don't either. It doesn't make a lick of sense other than he's the most radical guy running for Senate in the United States that I've ever heard of. Eric, thank you for your service and your testimony this morning. I appreciate it. Time for me to take my relieffactor.com. It is cold inside of the Beltway, friends, but I got out and trundled 4 yesterday. And it was a long 4. I had the scarf on, the wind was up, all that stuff. But I still did it because I had my relief factor. It's not like super dry. It's not like spinach and Popeye. Stone cold coffee this morning. It's not like spinach and Popeye, but it is like Carrion Curcumin Resveratrol Omega. It is the 4 supplement package that you absolutely have to take if you want to support the temporary relief of minor aches and pains. You got to be exercising, especially in a period of time when we're not out walking around in our normal thing. You have to be intentional about it. You got to get up and do it. You got to get going, and those will bring minor aches and pains. And if you're aging, they'll bring minor aches and pains. Take the Relief Factor every day like I do. ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. David Drucker is next, America, on The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The self-declared democratic socialist who hates capitalism She evidently doesn't hate it that much. She's selling T-shirts that say tax the rich on them. You know how much the T-shirts are? $58. And the $58 does not include shipping and handling. I'm not kidding you. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this radical tyrant who, cover of Vanity Fair and everybody, the left just loves her and she's so brilliant. Remember, she's the one that chased Amazon out of New York City. They were going to build a second headquarters in New York. It was going to bring, I think the number was 40,000 good-paying jobs to New York. $30 billion in new revenue. She chased them out. She fought and won and chased Amazon away. Well, this week, the pre-orders are being taken for the gender-neutral fit T-shirts that say tax the rich that cost $58. With shipping and handling, apparently, according to the AOC website, whatever fresh hell that, I wouldn't go to that website if you held me hostage. The shirt would ship through the U.S. Postal Service. It'll ship in 1 to 2 weeks, plus 2 business days in transit for a grand total of $67.22.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
How did you guys get this footage, and why is it you and your team that's been
very
able?
lucky. We were.
Yeah, go ahead.
I can't exactly tell you who the in-between person was, but we were informed that the center keeps its own video cam. They have it there when games are on. They have it, and basically, we asked if it was turned off during the process, and the answer was no. It goes 24 hours a day. Wow. So it sounds like it was a bit of an oversight by the crooks. Charlie, I've caught a lot of crooks, and they always make a mistake, no matter how smart they think they are. But this is a smoking gun tape. You see the woman bring the ballots in. You see her hide them. They go through a whole phony day of counting ballots. As soon as they get everybody out, they lock up the doors. They pull out the phony ballots, and then if you look at the vote count, he goes up 176,000 votes. Biden does.
Here's where I'm confused or frustrated and angry. Your team's able to get this, but where is the
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by David M. Drucker, the Washington Examiner. David, like me, has spent a lot of his adult life in California. And David, Gavin Newsom faces an unenviable choice. He's got to replace Kamala Harris in the Senate. He looks like he's going to have to replace Javier Becerra in the Attorney Generalship. I personally believe there's a lot of advantage if he puts a self-funder, a deep-pocketed billionaire into the Senate seat, because they're going to be running together in November of 2022. What do you think he's going to do?
Yeah, good question. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure to apply a sort of diverse field of replacements, right? So you still don't have in California a lot of Latinos in the upper echelons of elected politics statewide, although they've been prevalent in the state house. And so I think there's going to be a lot of pressure there. And I think that goes for the Senate seat as well. And look, he's got a lot of big problems right now. Filling seats is the least of them. But for somebody who does have ambitions, I think, beyond the California governor's office, I think that these are going to be important picks for him from a political standpoint within the Democratic Party.
Karen Bass, longtime African-American congresswoman from Los Angeles, wants the job, as do other people like Alex Padilla, who would check the diversity box. But I'm a very practical guy. California is going to be a $100 to $150 million state. And if someone like Peter Thiel runs against him, or Undersecretary Kroc of the State Department runs against him, he's going to have a huge race on his hands. And the practical side of finding a deep pocket, I just don't know who in Silicon Valley brings billions to the table who is liberal enough for the state.
Well, I think the bigger issue, Hugh, is number one, anybody that he would pick from the House, even from a safe Democratic seat, would for several months leave Nancy Pelosi down a seat when she's got, like a 4 or 5 seat majority. So I don't know how you pick anybody out of the House, even when you know that in a special election they're going to be replaced by a Democrat, because for several months with a lot of, forget tough votes, any votes, they need every vote that they can get, and I think there's going to be pressure to leave the House alone, and you're seeing that in Joe Biden's picks for his new administration. That's number one. Number two, I don't think you have to worry about a Senate race. I think a federal race in California statewide, a Democrat will win, and especially with the top 2 primary system, you'll end up with 2 Democrats in the general election going against each other. I do think from a statewide perspective, depending on how much backlash there is to how Newsom is handling this latest wave of the coronavirus with lockdown policies and policies relating to school closures, that, a self-funder could potentially do some damage, somebody who is either slightly center-right or maybe only slightly center-left. But I still wonder, how much that comes into play, number one, especially with the top 2 primary system, and number 2, just given how blue the state is at this time until, we see, proof that maybe a sort of moderate centrist Republican can do some damage.
Well, also remember, with Becerra going to HHS, and I can't imagine he's going to be turned down. I think they're going to focus most of their fire on Neera Tanden. They're going to have to appoint an attorney general who also, they're going to be 3 new, they're going to be Gavin Newsom and 2 new faces on the November 22 ballot. One of those had better be, in my view, an Asian American. If you're going to pick because that's the demographic that is not served statewide, ever. Never been served statewide, except for the March Fong Yu, who was on the, permanently Secretary of State for like 100 years. So I just, wasn't she? Well, it was March Fong Yu. I can remember that in my sleep.
Yeah, I know, me too. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. But
yeah, but she was just the automatic Secretary of State forever, and they had good elections, by the way. She did a good job. So I just think it's fascinating, David, because there is a backlash in California. Dwayne grumbles about it every morning. And literally every morning he's grumpy about having to stand in line to get the Weather Center whiteboard done. Have you heard about this yet? There's a recall underway.
Yeah, look, you and I have been through a recall, and so I think, let's see if there's some money behind the signature gathering and who might emerge as a potential candidate, because both money and candidates mattered in 2003. But I think there's a lot of frustration. I was following my buddy John Myers, who's the LA Times bureau chief, on Twitter last night, and he was talking about the fact that Gavin Newsom takes a lot of questions about what are you doing now, and he keeps talking about what he did months ago or what he already did do, and not how he's going to handle things going forward. And politics aside, I think there's a lot of frustration, especially because this time around there hasn't been, as of yet, any assistance from the federal government to soften the blow, and Newsom's getting a lot of questions about some of the uneven choices that are being made in California, some of which may be necessary, but it doesn't seem to be explained all that well, and people are frustrated.
Keep your eye on Peter Thiel and Undersecretary of State Kroc. These are the 2 Republicans who could conceivably do the recall or do the statewide Senate race if people have had it with Democrats come November of 2022. David M. Drucker on Twitter. Thank you, David. Coming right back, America. Hour number 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show, straight ahead.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom has repeatedly called on Californians to come together and make sacrifices to fight COVID-19. The request would have been better received if, at the same time, Governor Newsom wasn't off violating his own public health guidance by dining with a group of lobbyists at one of America's most posh restaurants, or sending his kids to a Sacramento private school in person while many California schools remain closed for in-person learning and millions of students slog their way through online classes. The problem with Newsom's hypocritical actions is that they undercut the very healthcare professionals and scientists whose advice he is asking Californians to follow. It makes those of us who live in California wonder who we can trust and what guidance we should be listening to. At a time when we need leadership and clarity, Newsom has given us hypocrisy and confusion. California's voters won't soon forget his shortcomings. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, impacting policy decisions today, preparing public leaders for tomorrow. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.
Hi there, it's Hugh Hewitt for Angel Tree. Let me ask you to think about a child waking up on Christmas without a present underneath their tree. Indeed, there might not be a tree there at all. That's what happens to 2.5 million children who have one or both parents in prison every single year. Angel Tree steps forward and for $220 can provide 10 of those children with a present, with a Christmas, and with a gospel message. So I'm partnering with Angel Tree this year, and if you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top you'll find the Angel Tree banner to make sure that those children, as many of them as possible, get some love at Christmas, some grace of the season, the proclamation of the word, for unto him a child is born. That is what Prison Fellowship through Angel Tree does. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can. $220 gift gives those gifts at Christmas to 10 different children. And thank you. Merry Christmas.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
The owner of the Blue Dog Beer Tavern in Sherman Oaks. He also owns a number of other restaurants. Paul, you were telling us that you were attacked by two homeless people after you essentially told one of them not to take a dump on your planter.
Yeah, that was in the morning.
How dare you? How dare you tell somebody not to take a dump on your planter? You think you own that planter?
I know. I had the nerve. That's the thing. I had the nerve to actually tell them not to do it.
You didn't build that.
But, Larry, this goes to a deeper problem, which is what did LAPD do 3 weeks ago? They defunded the gang unit. They defunded the homeless outreach program. LAPD, I mean, the officers themselves, I feel bad for these guys. They want to do their jobs, but they are no longer allowed to do their jobs, nor do they have the money to do their jobs. Mm-hmm. Same with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, by the way. Back in March, when everybody was locked in their homes and everybody was home, I never went home for those 3 months between March and June when we got the restaurant back open. And during those 3 months, the streets got very, very dangerous because there were no citizens on the street. It's happening again. And in June, when people started coming out, it felt so much better. You could tell, you could feel it when the people were back on the streets, when pedestrians were walking up and down the sidewalks. I'm getting that feeling again now because everyone's again in their homes, and at night it gets very, very scary, and there's no one there to help. There's no one there to help anymore.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So instead of the slate of electors for the candidate that has the nominal majority, what could they do? Two slates?
Send conflicting electors, and in fact, that's what happened.
So from
the election,
from either candidate,
from both,
yes,
and say we can't resolve it.
Interesting.
And that's what's happened in United States history before, and then it would fall to the House if there's not 270 with one candidate. I will also add this: these deadlines are artificial.
Yes.
The December 8th and December 14th is a congressional statute built out of convenience, not out of constitutional need. Transitions will proceed. In fact, if you look to the history of those, I'm betting that if we go back into the 1800s, we'll find that they were centered around the harvest and how long it took to ride a horse to Washington.
Right.
That should not prevent us from being able to take the time necessary to look at this election. So I believe you are spot on, sir. And it's absolutely true. There is no rush. We're okay. The Constitution has a framework for this, and these congressional statutes are out there, but they are not definitive. They are really, in many ways, artificial deadlines.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Than that, once you talk about China having purchased Dominion voting systems in October, I mean, that's the kind of a blockbuster that I don't even know how to respond. How can you have an election? How can you process votes when you know that our enemy, and certainly the enemy of this president, because they know he's the only one with the guts to stand up to them, would be so involved in our own election?
Well, this is the point that that if these things are true, and most of them are true, for example, is it true that these democratic cities have a long history of corruption? Check, that is true. Is it true that these voting machines can be manipulated? Let's leave aside for a moment if they were manipulated. Let's just ask if they could be. And the answer appears to be check, yes. So that's the point here, is that even if you weren't able to show that there was massive and widespread fraud, but you were able to show that the people who made these machines did it for fraud, and moreover that they can be programmed, reprogrammed, they can do weighted voting, they can swap votes from one side to the other, this alone would be enough to shatter, I think, any reasonable confidence that this was and that future elections will be fair.
Yeah, it's kind of like finding a car with, 5 kilos of heroin, and the person says, oh, but you know what? I didn't use the heroin and I didn't sell the heroin. And
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom has repeatedly called on Californians to come together and make sacrifices to fight COVID-19. The request would have been better received if, at the same time, Governor Newsom wasn't off violating his own public health guidance by dining with a group of lobbyists at one of America's most posh restaurants, or sending his kids to a Sacramento private school in person while many California schools remain closed for in-person learning and millions of students slog their way through online classes. The problem with Newsom's hypocritical actions is that they undercut the very healthcare professionals and scientists whose advice he is asking Californians to follow. It makes those of us who live in California wonder who we can trust and what guidance we should be listening to. At a time when we need leadership and clarity, Newsom has given us hypocrisy and confusion. California's voters won't soon forget his shortcomings. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, impacting policy decisions today, preparing public leaders for tomorrow. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Hi there, it's Hugh Hewitt. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings, my 400 affiliates across the United States. Joined now by the one and only Byron York, who you watch on Fox News. You're reading the Washington Examiner. Good day to you, Byron. Thank you for joining me.
Good day, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about Georgia, but first, just a quick question. In California, Gavin Newsom is going to have to appoint a senator and an attorney general if Javier Becerra is confirmed as the HHS secretary. That means Gavin Newsom's got to come up with people who will be running with him in 2022. He's already got the burden of a shutdown that is very, very unpopular, meaning a Republican might actually have a chance in the 2022 Senate race if they are a deep-pocketed self-funder like Peter Thiel would be, or Keith Kroc, the Undersecretary of State. Have you heard any buzz about Gavin Newsom's appointment and whether or not he's going to seek a self-funder, a deep pocket as well?
Unclear. I do think, I mean, you have to have more than self-funding. I mean, you have to have political ability. The question of whether somebody like Peter Thiel would have the political ability to go with the obvious money that he has is a real open question. The idea of a Republican having a chance is kind of interesting because, I mean, California has become more and more and more a single-party state. So the idea of a Republican actually representing them in Washington statewide is pretty novel.
It would take a techie who was a libertarian on social matters and experience. Keith Kwok does appeal to me, the Undersecretary of State and the founder of DocuSign, which everybody loves, right? Everybody loves DocuSign. But it's worth looking at. They talk about Karen Bass and a diversity appointment. I just think Gavin Newsom's got so many political problems, he has to look other than to traditionally satisfying traditional constituents on this one.
Well, everything about this year has been unusual. Everything about this coronavirus year has been unusual. And he cannot, I agree with you, he can't just do the old calculation. But it is California, and I think he's going to have to go with someone who's very, very progressive.
Think about an Asian American, which is a growing demographic in the country, who is coming out of Silicon Valley. Now let's turn to Georgia, Byron. Last night, I called attention to the New York Times attempt to block and tackle for Raphael Warnock, saying that his comment to serve God in the military wasn't possible. The New York Times wrote that's a theme that has roots in biblical passages, which surprised me. Peter Beinart responded, "You mean King David, who wasn't allowed to build the temple because he had shed blood?" And I said, "Well, you run with that, Peter." And he said, no, just saying that there's a tradition in Jewish tradition of the tension between militarism and holiness. And it just isn't. Raphael Warnock is just out there, Byron. Do the people of Georgia know that?
Yeah, well, his explanation was that he was basically taking the biblical injunction that you cannot serve God and man at the same time to include the military. And so it was just a figure of speech on his part. But it was maybe not the most disturbing thing about the debate the other night. What about the line when he's asked about whether he would support court packing? He said, "I'm just not focused on it." I mean,
right?
Like, I haven't thought about it. And that's a huge issue for progressives. And remember, Bernie Sanders said he hoped to elect the two Democrats in Georgia and make the Biden presidency the most progressive in American history. I mean, that's what this is about.
I also think the president did his job on Saturday. I played a lot of his clips yesterday. I don't need to replay them to you. He went down there and delivered. David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler are on my team, and I support them 100%. Implicit in that was you're getting played by some fringe people and the Democrats and by black bag operations that are trying to create the impression of a split in the Republican Party. I don't think, even though the Secretary of State and the governor are arguing with the president, I don't think that affects anybody supporting, any significant number of people supporting Loeffler and Perdue. Do you?
Yeah, we're on the same page about this. I wrote about the same thing yesterday. Remember, all of the reporting going into the president's visit was that he was just going to go down to Georgia and he was going to rant about the presidential election, and in the process he was going to ignore the Senate race and undermine the candidacies of Loeffler and Perdue. And it just didn't happen. I mean, he talked a lot about the presidential race, there's no doubt about it, but he talked a whole lot about the Senate race. And he was just encouraging people to vote left and right. There was a huge sign. There was this big blue sign behind him saying, "Request absentee ballot right now." So he said, if you're going to vote by mail, do it right now. Go in person when there's early voting. Do it on election day. So he was really, really pushing voting. Now, on the supporters who are urging a boycott of the election because it, quote, won't be secure, he took a direct shot at Linwood and Sidney Powell, the two attorneys who had been saying that. And he said, look, these are my friends. These are people who are great people. But we can't do that. You can't do that. If you do it, the radical left wins. It was an unmistakable refutation of what Powell and Wood had been saying.
Now, Byron, I have been talking for 20 years on this show about media bias. And I believe it was deep in the last election. I mean, the Washington Post ABC poll that came out that showed the president was down 17 points in Wisconsin 6 days before the election, I think cost him the election. And not just in Wisconsin, but in Arizona and Georgia. I think it had a blanketing, a damp blanket effect on everyone in the country because we all followed it very closely. Now I see in the coverage of Georgia that left-wing media again playing up the fringe and playing down the president's unequivocal support for Perdue and Loeffler, and playing down Warnock's left wing. I mean, he's really left wing, and playing down the fact that Ossoff is a 33-year-old who's never had a job. Honestly, he's never had a job other than running for office.
Yeah, on the bias part, you're absolutely right about this. I was talking about the sort of preconceptions going into the rally. That's what the press was reporting. Well, after the rally, they just reported the same thing. Two headlines. Yes. Washington Post, at Georgia rally, Trump spouts election falsehoods, amplifies old grievances. New York Times, at rally for Georgia senators, Trump focuses on his own grievances. So it didn't matter what Trump said. I mean, the story was written ahead of time. So I think that there is a storyline in Georgia and sort of a mainstream media storyline, and the story is President Trump, obsessed with his own election prospects, falsely claiming to have won, will undermine the Republican Party in Georgia, leading to a Democratic Senate. I think that's the storyline. But, it's probably not going to happen.
And I now I don't use mainstream media anymore, Byron, because this is mainstream media. I use legacy media. That's media that existed prior to the launch of Fox News and prior to the launch of Rush Limbaugh. So it would probably be 1990 and prior. The Fairness Doctrine went away in 89. Rush started in 90. I started in 91. So legacy media is media that existed prior to 1990, and it is deeply left-wing, and it doesn't even try to hide it anymore. And on this Georgia race, it pulsates. It pulses through every story. Their pattern, their template. They don't even bother to hide it anymore.
I'll go with legacy media. I think that's a perfectly good phrase. And look, they don't bother to hide it because it's so important. I mean, this race is so important. You've talked about it a million times. It will basically decide whether Republicans can stop the Biden agenda or not, or whether Democrats can do basically anything they want if they're united in the Senate. So,
and the Joe Manchin, I would love you to comment. Yeah. I've heard Joe Manchin said he won't expand the court. They will pass the budget bill, which gives them one free shot. That's how you can get Obamacare through on reconciliation. That's how you can get a massive tax hike through on reconciliation. You get anything through on reconciliation if you have 51 votes in the Senate. That's what this comes down to, is the reconciliation bills, even if Joe Manchin wouldn't support a change in the filibuster.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I think Americans would almost be shocked at the number of things you can do with just a majority vote in the Senate if you get rid of the filibuster. I mean, if you have a president who's willing to sign something, you can add states, you can change the number of justices on the Supreme Court. You can do all of these structural things in our system with a vote of Congress and the president's signature.
Amen. And that is why the stakes have never been higher for two Senate races, as the president said, even though it wasn't widely reported. Byron York, follow him on Twitter, read him in the Washington Examiner, watch him on Fox News. Come right back to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Prison Fellowship. Click on the Angel Tree banner at the top of HughHewitt.com.
Good for Angel Tree. let me ask you to think about a child waking up on Christmas without a present underneath their tree. Indeed, there might not be a tree there at all. That's what happens to 2.5 million children who have one or both parents in prison every single year. Angel Tree steps forward and for $220 can provide 10 of those children with a present, with a Christmas, and with a gospel message. So I'm partnering with Angel Tree this year, and if you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top you'll find the Angel Tree banner to make sure that those children, as many of them as possible, get some love at Christmas, some grace of the season, the proclamation of the word, for unto him a child is born. That is what Prison Fellowship through Angel Tree does. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can. $220 gift gives those gifts that Christmas to 10 different children. And thank you. Merry Christmas.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
The owner of the Blue Dog Beer Tavern in Sherman Oaks. He also owns a number of other restaurants. Paul, you were telling us that you were attacked by two homeless people after you essentially told one of them not to take a dump on your planter.
Yeah, that was in the morning.
How dare you? How dare you tell somebody not to take a dump on your planter? You think you own that planter?
I know. I had the nerve. That's the thing. I had the nerve to actually tell them not to do it.
You didn't build that.
But, Larry, this goes to a deeper problem, which is what did LAPD do 3 weeks ago? They defunded the gang unit. They defunded the homeless outreach program. LAPD, I mean, the officers themselves, I feel bad for these guys. They want to do their jobs, but they are no longer allowed to do their jobs, nor do they have the money to do their jobs. Mm-hmm. Same with the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, by the way. Back in March, when everybody was locked in their homes and everybody was home, I never went home for those 3 months between March and June when we got the restaurant back open. And during those 3 months, the streets got very, very dangerous because there were no citizens on the street. It's happening again. And in June, when people started coming out, it felt so much better. You could tell, you could feel it when the people were back on the streets, when pedestrians were walking up and down the sidewalks. I'm getting that feeling again now because everyone's again in their homes, and at night it gets very, very scary, and there's no one there to help. There's no one there to help anymore.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
So instead of the slate of electors for the candidate that has the nominal majority, what could they do? Two slates?
Send conflicting electors, and in fact, that's what happened.
So from either candidate,
from both,
yes,
and say we can't resolve it.
Interesting.
And that's what's happened in United States history before, and then it would fall to the House if there's not 270 with one candidate. I will also add this: these deadlines are artificial.
Yes.
The December 8th and December 14th is a congressional statute built out of convenience, not out of constitutional need. Transitions will proceed. In fact, if you look to the history of those, I'm betting that if we go back into the 1800s, we'll find that they were centered around the harvest and how long it took to ride a horse to Washington.
Right.
That should not prevent us from being able to take the time necessary to look at this election. So I believe you are spot on, sir. And it's absolutely true. There is no rush. We're okay. The Constitution has a framework for this, and these congressional statutes are out there, but they are not definitive. They're really, in many ways, artificial deadlines.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Checking out the markets this morning in Europe. Everything is red. In Asia, everything is red as the coronavirus spikes across the world and global economies shudder. I imagine it will be a troubled day on the market. This market update brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. They run a terrific office of Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They lend you money if you want to buy a house or refinance a house or help your son or daughter, grandson or granddaughter get into a house by becoming a non-occupying co-borrower. If you need a reverse mortgage, you want to get money out of your house and at the same time never make another payment again, then the thing to do is to give Andrew and Todd a call or go online to andrewandtodd.com. And answer a couple of questions. They'll be right back to you. They got a terrific team, terrific men. 888-888-1172. That also works the old-fashioned way, and they'll spend as much time as you need. I get letters almost every week from people who just love them. And I joke, I've known Andrew for 20-plus years. We were in a Bible study together for a long time, that it's all just, he's just not really very nice at all. But he is actually wonderful, and Todd Avakian is wonderful, too. The market yesterday was mixed, as I said. The Dow was down, the NASDAQ was up, but today it's going to be a rough day. Not as rough, though, if you've got a mom or dad in jail, and that's why I always ask people to think about Angel Tree. You got a mom or dad in jail, Angel Tree helps you through the year, but especially at Christmas. They remind you that your parents behind bars still love you. They provide presents and a Bible and a note for mom or dad. They've been doing it for 30 years. They're the best. And unfortunately, this year, their delivery system is fractured because the church patio system is broken. So they need people. If they're going to serve they served more than 370,000 children last year. And, if you're 4, 5, 7, 9, you need a present or two from mom or dad, and you need a note, and you get a Bible as well. And it can make a world of difference. It has made a world of difference in the Angel Tree Fellowship. But you got to go online to HughHewitt.com. Go to the very top. Give your best gift, whatever that is. Whether it's $10, $100, $1,000, $5,000, $100,000, give your best gift. Kathy in Pennsylvania calling about the radical Raphael Warnock's statement that you cannot, America, serve God in the military. Kathy?
Yes, the preamble to the Marines is no greater love hath no man than he who would lay his life down for his friends.
Thank you, Kathy. KJ in Houston. Go ahead, KJ.
Yeah, 3 words, Jehovah of armies in the Old Testament all over.
I agree.
There
Thank you. Thank you, KJ. Daniel in Illinois, 1-800-520-1234. If people are just tuning in, this is what we're talking about. This is Raphael Warnock in the pulpit in 2011, cut number 4.
America, nobody can serve God and the military.
Times yesterday said, that is a theme that has roots in biblical passages, to which I wrote on Twitter, someone going to surprise King David with that, to which Peter Beinart said, King David wasn't allowed in the temple because he had shed blood, and then added that there's a recognition in the Jewish tradition of the tension between militarism and the requirements of holiness. I think that's nonsense. Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, what I was telling your guy there was, you changed the words to that Bible verse. It actually states, no man can serve 2 masters, for he will love and obey the one and refuse the other. And he's doing it for some underlying reason, and I don't know.
He did it, and we cannot serve God and Mammon is the well-known verse, and the 2 masters verse is well-known, but that has not ever been applied. There are some pacifists in the Christian tradition. I got to admit, there's a thin slice of Christianity that's pacifist, but widely believed from the beginning of Christendom that people can serve in the military and be devout. Thank you, Daniel. Tom in Pittsburgh, you got 20 seconds, Tom.
Hey, Hugh. I don't get how a guy that's pro-choice gets to be a minister in the Baptist church. I was a Baptist for years. We're pro. I'm pro-life, and I just don't see how they can allow that.
And not just pro-choice. He's radically pro-abortion rights to the end of the pregnancy. Radically. Raphael Warnock is a radical, and everyone in Georgia needs to know he's the radical, most left-leaning major party candidate, serious candidate in my lifetime. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Can you just reinforce what we saw in that video and the significance of that? Because if that's
Oh,
not
my
glaring
goodness,
evidence,
Charlie.
I mean, oh my goodness.
I would say I prosecuted, I oversaw 5,000. I probably personally prosecuted close to 100. I don't think I ever had evidence that good. Maybe a bank robbery every once in a while. I mean, it lays out the whole crime. So the security cameras were on in the center all day. I don't think they knew that. That was done by the center. So very quickly, what you see is when they start counting in the morning, before anybody gets there, a woman with blonde braided hair comes in with a group of boxes and puts them under a table that is then covered with a black cloth. Very, very big table. A gigantic dining room size table or conference table. A black blanket is put over it. Behind it is a white blanket over either another table or maybe a bin that has votes in it. It stays there from 8:30 on. All day, people are walking around. One of the things you can see, first of all, is the observers were a football field away from what they were observing. So every vote observed that day wasn't observed. So every vote counted that day has to be discounted. They violated the law, which said you have to allow the public and the opposition to view the mail-in ballots. If you just look at the video, you will see that the observers were, it looks to me like a football field away. Maybe it's 80 yards. But they all testified one after another. We couldn't see it even with binoculars.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom has repeatedly called on Californians to come together and make sacrifices to fight COVID-19. The request would have been better received if, at the same time, Governor Newsom wasn't off violating his own public health guidance by dining with a group of lobbyists at one of America's most posh restaurants, or sending his kids to a Sacramento private school in person while many California schools remain closed for in-person learning and millions of students slog their way through online classes. The problem with Newsom's hypocritical actions is that they undercut the very healthcare professionals and scientists whose advice he is asking Californians to follow. It makes those of us who live in California wonder who we can trust and what guidance we should be listening to. At a time when we need leadership and clarity, Newsom has given us hypocrisy and confusion. California's voters won't soon forget his shortcomings. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, impacting policy decisions today, preparing for tomorrow. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.
Hi there, it's Hugh Hewitt for Angel Tree. Let me ask you to think about a child waking up on Christmas without a present underneath their tree. Indeed, there might not be a tree there at all. That's what happens to 2.5 million children who have one or both parents in prison every single year. Angel Tree steps forward and for $220 can provide 10 of those children with a present, with a Christmas, and with a gospel message. So I'm partnering with Angel Tree this year, and if you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top you'll find the Angel Tree banner to make sure that those children, as many of them as possible, get some love at Christmas, some grace of the season, the proclamation of the word, for unto him a child is born. That is what Prison Fellowship through Angel Tree does. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can. $220 gift gives those gifts that Christmas to 10 different children. And thank you. Merry Christmas.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
People are fuming. Those who believe that Donald Trump is right that the election was stolen, are fuming with, are angry at Bill Barr because they claim that he said there was no evidence. He didn't say there was no evidence. He said he's not seen any widespread evidence of voter fraud yet. This is a man who's had the president's back from day one. He did the summary of the Mueller probe, suggested that the president had been vindicated. He even used the word spy that the president has used and said his campaign was in fact spied on. He was reamed by the
Welcome back, America. That music means it's time for Admiral James Stavridis to join me, retired United States Navy, former head of Southern Command, former head of European Command, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, and sometimes the stars align, Admiral. The news is that General Austin is the new Secretary of Defense designate from the President-elect, and you are contemporaries. You must know him well.
I do know him well. I worked with Lloyd over 20 years ago in the Pentagon when I was a relatively young Navy captain. He was the Army equivalent, a colonel. He's a Silver Star recipient, fought in both Iraq and Afghanistan, commanded at every significant level, was a 4-star in charge of all of our troops in Iraq at one point. So great operational combat experience. But here's another important part about being Secretary of Defense, Hugh, and you know this. He knows the building. He knows the Pentagon. He's been the Vice Chief Staff of the Army, the Director of the Joint Staff, which maybe doesn't sound like a lot to many observers. I would say the most important 3-star job in the armed forces. He oversees the entire Joint Staff and kind of pulls all that advice together for the chairman, the SecDef, and the president. He's had that job. As I mentioned, Directorate of Operations. So he's got great Pentagon building Washington experience alongside very strong combat experience. And then lastly, personally, he's calm, he's steady. I think he is what the Pentagon needs at the moment after 4 different secretaries of defense in the last 4 years.
Now, Admiral, let's run through the objections that have been raised. The first is that a waiver will be needed. A waiver was secured for General Mattis. I doubt very much that one will be denied General Austin. But why does that law exist, and what do you think about a second successive waiver in a second successive administration?
Yeah, it is the right question to raise. There ought to be a robust discussion of it, and I think there will be during Lloyd's confirmation hearings. And the reason it exists is because we, as Americans, we want civilian control of the military. So obviously our president is a civilian. We like that our Secretary of Defense is a civilian. It's actually happened twice. You mentioned Jim Mattis, as I'm sure you know, Hugh. Early on, we saw George Marshall become Secretary of Defense in a relatively brief period of time after coming out of the military. So the law exists to make sure that we don't just recycle old admirals and generals into these civilian leadership spots. But again, when I look at where we are right now with 4 SecDefs in 4 years under President Trump, I think bringing someone into the job who really knows the military, has lived it, and he retired, I think, 4 years ago. So that's a pretty good fire break. I think the law requires 7 years. Yeah. Close enough, in my view, and I think he will get through.
So, Admiral, this raises the second question. He's a contemporary of General Milley, who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and probably was, if I've got my timing down, because General Milley was recalled to take that job, probably was served under General Milley at some point. Is there any problem with putting a former, if I'm correct about that, a former subordinate on the top of the chain? Does that create any kind of weird situation?
I think your chronology might be slightly off. Maybe we should both check. But my recollection is that Lloyd is a 1975 graduate of West Point. And I believe General Milley, who went to Princeton, by the way, did not commission until probably 70 to 80. So I would be very surprised if we discovered that Lloyd had served under Milley. I think rather the opposite. My guess is that Lloyd knows Milley well. Milley has probably worked for Lloyd at some point, or they have certainly.
Well, then that would be much more natural.
Yeah, indeed. So I don't see that as a problem. Now, I will say this, with my tongue slightly in cheek, as a Navy admiral, I kind of say, we got a Secretary of Defense who's a West Point graduate and an Army guy through and through, and we have a Chairman of the Joint Chiefs who happens to be a Princeton graduate, but is an Army guy through and through. Maybe, I hope my beloved Navy doesn't get disadvantaged. I say that, again, with my tongue in cheek, knowing both Lloyd and Mark Milley. And by the way, Mark Milley has spoken fairly recently, as I'm sure you saw, about the need to build our Navy. But there won't be any problem with that. Both of them are joint officers who have served in joint commands. Lloyd's last command, of course, was combatant commander of U.S. Central Command, where he commanded Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, just like I did in Europe and in U.S. Southern Command. He's a joint officer. He'll treat the Navy just fine.
Well, in fact, that's my last question. My major question is that I did get questions from my friends in the Navy. Oh, there goes the rebuild of the Navy. We've got another Army guy. General Milley did give the speech at Brookings where he said we've got, basically it was a telegraph to the Army that you're going to lose your third, one-third, one-third. It's going to go down and the Navy's going to go up. But to me, I immediately thought, well, Nixon to China. General Mattis came in from the sea services and did not reallocate money in favor of the Navy, kept the allocation pretty much as it was. Maybe it takes an Army duo to actually reallocate the pie significantly to the sea services. Any merit to that, Admiral?
I like the way you're thinking, and I suspect it'll be actually less about Nixon goes to China and more about we are all worried about China. In other words, and you know this well, if we're going to create real military deterrence against China, we're not going to do it with a large standing army because we're not going to fight a land war in Asia, as the saying goes. But we are going to need a robust Navy and long-range Air Force assets if we're going to deter China. So I think both Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley get that. And alongside most current defense analysts, I think we're going to see a reasonable plus up to the Navy because of the realities of China.
Now, Admiral, I don't take a backseat in my admiration to anyone when it comes to General Mattis. But as I said to him when I interviewed him at the Nixon Library, the critique of his time was that he stood up Central Command as his staff. It was just everybody who had served Jim Mattis as Central Command came and took up staff jobs at the Pentagon, jobs typically held by civilians, and that was disruptive to the normal operation of the building. Do you think General Austin will be going out and finding his old chief of staff, his old second in command, and bringing them in to the Pentagon with him?
My guess is, and it's purely a guess, I haven't discussed this with Lloyd, is that he will know that the best course of action for him is to come in as a civilian leader and surround himself with people who are strong on their own merits, whether he has worked with them before or not. And let's face it, he will need help in a couple of areas. One is procurement and acquisition. That's not a defense, you can bring some of those assets. He'll need some help on Asia. He does not have a strong background in Asia. And as we were just discussing, that'll be critical for the new Secretary of Defense. And he's going to want to create a sense of some stability in the Pentagon. Now, as you well know, all transitions are horse trading opportunities where those who have supported the campaign want to come and be the Secretary of the Air Force or the Secretary of the Navy. And General Austin will get some picks. I should say Secretary Designate Austin will get some picks. And the transition team will get some picks, and the Democratic Party will get some picks. So it'll be a mix. And I'll close with this. Every secretary should bring one or two people that he or she is really comfortable with and has worked around in the past. But broadly speaking, my guess and my hope is that Secretary-designate Austin will start to bring in outside players that maybe he doesn't know well, but who can help him in some of the areas we just discussed.
Now, when former Secretary Gates was a guest on this program after his most recent book, and I asked him about his comments about President-elect Biden being wrong about everything for 40 years, he said, well, look, I'm also worried about his tension with the generals, that he didn't get along with the brass at the Pentagon. I was encouraged to see he had actually been at either a change of command or the retirement ceremony of Lloyd Austin, that he knows him, knows the Secretary of Defense. We're not going to have a McNamara Johnson situation here. How important is it? This is a civilian's question, but I mean, how important is it that the SecDef and the president like each other?
It's very helpful. I've seen examples kind of going both ways, both in the Secretary of Defense level and at the Secretary of the Navy level. Sometimes the Secretary of the Navy and the Chief of Naval Operations get along extremely well, and sometimes there's real collision there. Same thing at that higher level with the SecDef and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So it's helpful, but not necessary. And, you know, government politics is the art of resolving differences and allocating resources. So I'm quite confident, knowing Lloyd Austin, that he'll get along very well with the military. And maybe more importantly, Hugh, he'll get along very well with the national security team around President-elect Biden. And he knows them. He's worked with them. He is well acquainted with every one of them, as am I, from our mutual time together. He'll be, as we talked about with the Biden National Security Team, there's no one on that team that I see who's trying to be the MVP of the team. It's a group that are going to try to make each other look good on the court, try to work together well, no drama, very collegial. I think Lloyd Austin fits that mold.
What about the question that there's a very controversial decision when he was CENTCOM commander to withdraw immediately from Iraq? I've already said on the program this morning, I just wonder if you agree, he executed an order there. He is not responsible for the decision. Do you agree with that, Admiral?
100%. And I don't know what Lloyd's personal views were at that time, but he is the consummate professional. That was an order. I think it was a mistake. As do many of my contemporaries, particularly those who fought in those wars. And I think you can drop a plumb line from that decision to the rise of the Islamic State. You ought to get, when he becomes Secretary of Defense, Austin on, ask him that question. It's a fair question.
One last question, which has to do with how they operate in comparison to General Mattis. In terms of time in the building, he was Chief of Staff of the Army, he was CENTCOM. Who has more time in the building before becoming Secretary of Defense, General Mattis or General Austin?
I think roughly the same. And they both had critical but slightly different jobs. But their backgrounds are fairly similar. And I think that it's a pretty good bet that General Mattis would be someone who would say, yeah, Lloyd Austin, 2 thumbs up. You'd have to ask him. Hey, I got a last thought for you. It's a really important one. And it's that you asked about, the allocations for the Navy and all that. Here's what I'm worried about. Who are they going to cheer for in the Army-Navy game? And that is coming right up. And
well, we know the answer to that, don't we, Admiral?
Oh, and as an Annapolis graduate, all I had to say to Secretary-designate Lloyd Austin, my great friend, is go Navy, beat Army. Coming right up this weekend.
There you go, Admiral. Good to see you. Thank you. We're going to get some ReliefFactor.com sent up to the Army and the Navy. ReliefFactor.com, 1995 gets you started. You don't want to go anywhere without it. Don't forget your ReliefFactor.com on Army-Navy game day or any day. ReliefFactor.com. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Ohio State is a 30-point favorite over the state up north. This is game week, and I hate it that Michigan, the state up north, has fallen so far that they are a 30-point underdog. I think it may be Jim Harbaugh's last game as the Wolverine coach. I mean, you can try and try and try and try and try some more. And Coach Harbaugh had success at Stanford, not much success in San Francisco in the NFL, and zero success. Of course, he's been up against Urban Meyer and Jim Tressel, Luke, and now Ryan Day, and so he's just been out-coached, out-recruited, out-played, out everything. So time to pass gently into the night, I think, up in my alma mater for law school. Time for, I mean, we really can't let the rivalry become a romp. And the rivalry has become a romp. I think Ohio State has won 13 of the past 14 contests. It's embarrassing. Just embarrassing. Speaking of embarrassing, I want to remind my 13 affiliates in Georgia what Chuck Schumer said, cut number 1.
Now we take Georgia, and then we change the world. Yeah! I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Schumer? Now we take Georgia, and then we change America.
That's what I love to hear. Can we play Chuck Schumer again, promising to annex the great state of Georgia to Manhattan? Wait.
Now we take Georgia, and then we change the world. Yeah! I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr. Schumer? Now we take Georgia, and then we change America.
That is the all-time favorite quote that Republicans have for an opponent election. That's what they call bulletin board material. When you just put that up in Georgia, Chuck Schumer's coming to take Atlanta, to march to the sea again, and turn it into an annex of his office in the Senate. And John Ossoff, the featherweight, who's trying to punch out a heavyweight, David Perdue, and Raphael Warnock, the radical, who's trying to take on a moderate, Kelly Loeffler. It's just not going to work out well for them. I want to play for you Admiral Brett Giroir, the Assistant Secretary of HHS, on California's ban on outdoor dining. I just want you to understand why Californians are upset. Cut number 7.
So I see it every day, even in my neighborhood, with a restaurant in the basement of on the first floor of my apartment. What really breaks my heart is that I don't know of any data that says you need to shut down outdoor dining or outdoor bars. We really wanted to limit the indoor crowded places. So I think we need to do what's necessary to turn the pandemic, but not more. That's not evidence-based. That's going to be counterproductive.
Why are they doing it then? Why are they doing it? Why are they keep saying it's the science. That's why they're shutting down all of California. Why are they doing it?
No, the science does not say that, and all of us on the task force, Dr. Fauci, Birx, Redfield, Hahn, we also, Dr. Adams, the Surgeon General, is that we do, if you're in a surge place, need to limit indoor dining and indoor bars. You don't have to close schools. You don't have to close universities. You don't have to close your major industries. You do need to wear a mask. That's critically important when you're in public and can't physically distance. Very, very important. And we see that these measures, they can be counterproductive. People get mad and upset because the science don't support them. The science does support limiting indoor dining and bars, but even now, there are many restaurants that have taken tremendous, they've split the tables by 7 feet. There's plexiglass. I'd like to see a little more individual attention to these places that have invested a lot of money and are probably safer than people having a house party with 100 people there. So, it's time to nuance. This is not March or April. This is December. We know what the science says. We know that there are countermeasures that are effective. And whatever the expression is, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I think we could be causing a lot more harm by overly restrictive recommendations that are not supported by the science. We're very clear.
Well, you see what they're doing in Los Angeles, Admiral. Sorry about that. But, Admiral, you see what they're doing in Los Angeles? You see what they're doing in California? Is the governor there wrong? Is the mayor of Los Angeles, are they wrong?
So what I'm saying is that the evidence clearly does not support limitations on things like outdoor dining, particularly that are spaced, outdoor bars. The evidence just isn't there. And remember, shutting down completely, particularly if you don't have evidence, can be counterproductive. We just saw this week data that said that drug overdose, cardiac arrest doubled during the shutdowns in April through June, doubled, 100% increase. We know that, children don't receive care, that heart attacks go unattended. So shutdowns do have consequences. Do what's necessary and evidence-based. We try to be very specific about that. But when you do more, it frustrates the population because it's not evidence-based, particularly when politicians violate their own rules. We have to be reasonable. We have to be fair. We have to be science-based.
Boy, that Admiral laid it on the ground, and that is the best summary of why so many people in California are upset with Gavin Newsom. And Gilgard said he...
That's us, Counterprotective California.
Now, there was the weather center.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for townhall.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom has repeatedly called on Californians to come together and make sacrifices to fight COVID-19. The request would have been better received if, at the same time, Governor Newsom wasn't off violating his own public health guidance by dining with a group of lobbyists at one of America's most posh restaurants, or sending his kids to a Sacramento private school in person while many California schools remain closed for in-person learning and millions of students slog their way through online classes. The problem with Newsom's hypocritical actions is that they undercut the very healthcare professionals and scientists whose advice he is asking Californians to follow. It makes those of us who live in California wonder who we can trust and what guidance we should be listening to. At a time when we need leadership and clarity, Newsom has given us hypocrisy and confusion. California's voters won't soon forget his shortcomings. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, impacting policy decisions today, preparing public leaders for tomorrow. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.
Hi there, it's Hugh Hewitt for Angel Tree. Let me ask you to think about a child waking up on Christmas without a present underneath their tree. Indeed, there might not be a tree there at all. That's what happens to 2.5 million children who have one or both parents in prison every single year. Angel Tree steps forward and for $220 can provide 10 of those children with a present, with a Christmas, and with a gospel message. So I'm partnering with Angel Tree this year, and if you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top you'll find the Angel Tree banner to make sure that those children, as many of them as possible, get some love at Christmas, some grace of the season, the proclamation of the word, for unto him a child is born. That is what Prison Fellowship through Angel Tree does. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can. $220 gift gives those gifts that Christmas to 10 different children. And thank you. Merry Christmas.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
People are fuming. Those who believe that Donald Trump is right, that the election was stolen, are angry at Bill Barr because they claim that he said there was no evidence. He didn't say there was no evidence. He said he's not seen any widespread evidence of voter fraud yet. This is a man who's had the president's back from day one. He did the summary of the Mueller probe, suggested that the president had been vindicated. He even used the word spy that the president has used and said his campaign was in fact spied on. He was reamed by the left for that. And in early last month, he sent out a directive. Let me read part of it for you, because this really infuriated the left, infuriated CNN, infuriated the New York Times, infuriated MSNBC. And he said in this memo, probe voting irregularities. Normal protocol is to wait until the election has been certified. He said, no, don't wait. You hear any substantial allegations of fraud, pursue them now, to the point where the official who's normally in charge of investigating voter fraud resigned. He was so angry. And here's what the New York Times said. Attorney General William Barr, wading into President Trump's unfounded accusations of widespread irregularities, told federal prosecutors on Monday they were allowed to investigate specific allegations of voter fraud before the results of the presidential race are certified. Barr's authorization prompted the DOJ official who oversees investigations of voter fraud, Roger Pilger, to step down from the post within hours, angry over the change in protocol.
Hello, Howard.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And I take you back to March of this year, when David Plouffe, Obama's former campaign manager, wrote a book called The Citizen's Guide to Defeating Donald Trump. And in it, everybody could see this, but he wrote on page 81, this election will come down to a block-by-block street fight to turn out the vote in Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and also Detroit. Now, he's working for Mark Zuckerberg at the time that he writes this. Suddenly, not long afterwards, Mark Zuckerberg is talking about pouring money
Howard, can you
into
hear
a
me?
small charity. He ends up...
Okay, we'll get you in just a second. Stand by. I can see you. We'll get you up in a second.
Okay, you can see me and hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you and I can see you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Whatever we're feeding the network right now, and we'll get you up with Hugh in just a couple minutes, okay?
Okay, do you mind if I record this on my end, by the way? Are you okay with that?
I don't care. It's fine by me.
Okay, great. Wayne, thank you so much. Everything's good on my end. Thank you.
This is Lon Chen of the Hoover Institution for Townhall.com. California Governor Gavin Newsom has repeatedly called on Californians to come together and make sacrifices to fight COVID-19. The request would have been better received if, at the same time, Governor Newsom wasn't off violating his own public health guidance by dining with a group of lobbyists at one of America's most posh restaurants, or sending his kids to a Sacramento private school in person while many California schools remain closed for in-person learning and millions of students slog their way through online classes. The problem with Newsom's hypocritical actions is that they undercut the very healthcare professionals and scientists whose advice he is asking Californians to follow. It makes those of us who live in California wonder who we can trust and what guidance we should be listening to. At a time when we need leadership and clarity, Newsom has given us hypocrisy and confusion. California's voters won't soon forget his shortcomings. I'm Lon Chen.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy, impacting policy decisions today, preparing public leaders for tomorrow. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu.
Hi there, it's Hugh Hewitt for Angel Tree. Let me ask you to think about a child waking up on Christmas without a present underneath their tree. Indeed, there might not be a tree there at all. That's what happens to 2.5 million children who have one or both parents in prison every single year. Angel Tree steps forward and for $220 can provide 10 of those children with a present, with a Christmas, and with a gospel message. So I'm partnering with Angel Tree this year, and if you go to HughHewitt.com, at the very top you'll find the Angel Tree banner to make sure that those children, as many of them as possible, get some love at Christmas, some grace of the season, the proclamation of the word, for unto him a child is born. That is what Prison Fellowship through Angel Tree does. That's what I'm asking you to do. Please go to HughHewitt.com and be as generous as you can. $220 gift gives those gifts that Christmas to 10 different children. And thank you. Merry Christmas. Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings to my 400 affiliates across the continent and the world. I am so pleased to welcome to the Hugh Hewitt Show a Washington institution himself. Howard Mortman is the communications director of C-SPAN, and everybody in D.C. knows him, and everybody who watches C-SPAN knows him. He's got the best Twitter account because it's nonpartisan and completely comprehensive. And now he has done us all a favor by publishing this book, When Rabbis Bless Congress, the Great American Story of Jewish Prayers on Capitol Hill. Howard Mortman, welcome. When Rabbis Bless Congress is wonderful. Congratulations. I'm going to ask you to tell us about how you came to write it first, because it's so comprehensive and it must have taken you years.
6 years, actually. You would answer that question first. Thank you. Incredibly kind. Thank you for mentioning C-SPAN in the introduction, because this is very much a result of me working at C-SPAN and watching Congress for a living, basically. And when you watch Congress every day, the House and the Senate, you kind of see things that kind of interest you. And for some reason, I've always been interested in the opening prayer. The chaplain, every session of Congress opens with a prayer. They do the prayer before they even do the Pledge of Allegiance. So the whole institution, it just intrigued me conceptually. I'm Jewish, so on occasions when there is a guest chaplain and the guest chaplain is a rabbi, that's kind of where my story begins. That just kind of piqued my interest even more. This book is applicable to anybody. It is a rabbi-based book, but it's not a Jewish book. It's a book about Congress and the history of Congress. And
it's also a book about prayer, Howard. I think this ought to be not only in every synagogue in America, but in every pastoral library, because it's just a celebration of a great American tradition that not many people know about who haven't taught con law.
Yeah, and it's a tradition that goes back to the very beginning of Congress. It even goes back to the Continental Congress. The first thing Congress did, even before the Bill of Rights was completed, was to hire a chaplain and to start praying. It was advocated by Benjamin Franklin. So the tradition of prayer in Congress goes back to the very beginning of the country. And since you mentioned law, it is protected by the Supreme Court. They have ruled in several cases that legislative sessions, city council meetings, and so on can open with a prayer.
I was impressed by your grasp of constitutional law, Howard Mortman. And When Rabbis Bless Congress, though, is more a wonderful celebration of prayer. I want to tell a few stories. First of all, there are two synagogues in which I have been that are in the book. Temple Bet Yam in Newport Beach. My friend Mark Miller is in the book, and Mark and I have taught at Chapman for years, and I've been to bar mitzvahs at Temple Bet Yam. And then, of course, I've been to Toro Synagogue, and I did not realize this is the synagogue to which George Washington wrote the famous 1790 letter saying, "All are welcome in our country." And on the 200th anniversary of that congregation, their rabbi spoke. See, there is a great interplay between history and prayer in this book.
So I love both of those stories. I will tell you, part of the writing of this, personal anecdotes. I've been meeting rabbis and families of rabbis who are connecting with this in a very emotional level. Your stories are great. It's funny you mentioned Rabbi Mark Miller. I'll connect myself to your story. When I grew up in Washington, D.C., I belonged to Temple Micah in Washington. One of the earliest rabbis who was an intern rabbi, a learning rabbi, was Rabbi Mark Miller. Back in the Yeah, so it's funny, only my brother and I would know that, but now Hugh Hewitt's mentioned it, but Rabbi Mark Miller back in the 70s was kind of, a student rabbi at my synagogue. So that's
my God. When you go to Temple Bet Yam, they will show you their Torah, and it's a very famous one that was recovered from the Prague Museum of Dead Religions that Hitler had arranged for, and it's just an amazing emotional experience. That brings me to another, there are a lot of emotional stories in When Rabbis Bless Congress. The most emotional to me, I think, is Jacob Schachter of New York offering the prayer on April 13th, 2000, because his father, Rabbi Herschel Schachter, rode through the gates of Buchenwald. And that is, to me, the quintessential American story, the son of a liberator of the Holocaust survivors preaching or praying for the body that dispatched those troops. It's really kind of just gave me another shiver.
Yeah, you know what? What's really cool about these stories, and again, this is not my story. This is the story of the rabbis and who they are and what they said. The Holocaust connection in the book is just so rich and great detail, like what you just mentioned. The idea that in that Rabbi Schachter, there were many Holocaust survivors who left Europe, survived, came to America, became rabbis, and then prayed in Congress. I mean, that's just extraordinary. What a way to defeat Hitler is by having Jews survive. There's like 6 or 7 Auschwitz survivors who left and came to America. And what a great country that you can live in, where a rabbi or any religion can pray in the literal center of democracy. It's the ultimate victory over Hitler in World War II by having rabbis pray in Congress.
Now, this morning I'm selling books. I have to remind you of the Frank Luntz rule, that you've got to say the title of the book 7 times in any interview for people to remember it. So When Rabbis Bless Congress is what the book is, and When Rabbis Bless Congress is available at Amazon in paperback and hardback. And you ought to get When Rabbis Bless Congress for your Christian friends, because not only is Lloyd Ogilvie one of the great preachers of American history in here, and Richard Halverson similarly. I used to belong to National Presbyterian Church when we lived in D.C. in the 80s, so I know both of these men very well. But you go right to the heart of the interplay between the Christian pastors who open and the rabbi pastors who open, and how the Christians borrow from the Jews and the Jews borrow from the Christians. And I love that you ask, what about all this Jesus talk to the Jewish members of the Congress? Explain what their reaction is, Howard.
Yeah, it's funny. Well, first of all, the non-Jewish clergy, the Christians who pray, often cite Jewish scripture, the Old Testament, in their prayers. And likewise, it's kind of obvious this is not a Jewish nation. I mean, they're predominantly Christian. So when rabbis come up, sometimes they have had to invoke more general, even Christian concepts, such as recognizing Christmas or so on. It's for the Jewish members whom you would say, well, do I feel threatened by a non-Jewish prayer? It's kind of an accepted practice that, these prayers are universal and they appeal to everybody. It's kind of in the rules of at least the house rules, that you're kind of praying to God, but you have to recognize that there are many people in the congregation, as it were, in the audience of Congress when they do it.
I want to also point out what I really appreciate about When Rabbis Bless Congress. At the end, you connect how prayers have evolved to social media is now a component of every prayer, and the rabbis are aware of it. That's very sensitive to the changing nature of the prayer, Howard. Expand it, because people will get a history of the Congress along with a history of the prayers of the Congress and a history of media and how it's been reported in this book.
Yeah, I will tell you, actually, right off the bat, my favorite story, to answer your question, comes from a person who's not a rabbi, a clergyman who I've befriended as a result of this project. His name is Pastor Dan Cummins. He's given the prayer dozens and dozens of times in the house. He told me, as a result of researching this, that even though the chamber might be empty, he knows he's speaking via video through C-SPAN and through the archived video to thousands of people. So that is just, the advent of video. C-SPAN began in '79, so therefore all the prayers opening Congress began broadcasting on national television in '79. So the video itself is what drives, the phenomena, more people being aware of these prayers. And then, more and more younger rabbis are tech savvy. They'll post it on Twitter. The members of Congress, again, you become a guest chaplain in Congress by having a member sponsor you. So a member of Congress or a senator who hosts a rabbi or another clergyman or woman will take their picture afterwards or celebrate. Or there was a rabbi from Cincinnati who, after prayed, Senator Mortman sponsored, and they went out and danced the hora in front of the Congress. So, they share social media.
I can't stress how perfect a Christmas and Hanukkah present this is. And I want to go back, Howard Mortman. This is a scholarly book. I'm impressed with its thoroughness and its precision and how it celebrates American tolerance of all religious traditions. How long? You said 6 years, but how many hours? I mean, this is just comprehensive.
So don't tell my family how many middle of the night, 2 a.m. Poring over congressional records sessions I did. I had two things. I had to go through a lot of C-SPAN video, but that starts in '79. So before that, I went through a heck of a lot of congressional records back to the 1860s, and I looked through every single prayer ever offered in Congress, looking for the rabbis. Now, the tricky part, you can't just search rabbi in congressional record because they're not often identified as rabbis. In the old days, they were called ministers or reverends, so you kind of have to go through everyone and see. I will have to mention my publisher, Academic Studies Press, is an academic publishing outfit. So yeah, I appreciate seeing it's an academic study. It kind of matches my publisher and what they were really after. The research took 3 years, and the writing took about 3 years, and the mechanics of publishing.
I want to stress, it's a wonderful read. You'll fly through it, America. When Rabbis Bless Congress by the one and the only Howard Mortman. Howard, thank you for joining this morning. Good luck to you. Happy Hanukkah to you. And thank you for When Rabbis Bless Congress. Stay tuned, America. I'll be right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hey, Howard, are you still there?
Damn, Hugh, you're killing me with kindness.
Well, it's a terrific book. And when I found Mark Miller, I just said touchdown. And I mean, there's so many touchdowns in this book. How's it doing? Do people know about it?
Oh no, frankly, it's doing terrible. I mean, but it's it's like it's such a niche. Like only people like you see the value in it. It's such a niche thing. We're trying hard, hustling, and all that, but I hope it does well, but just you claw for everything you get in this as an author. So
well, every rabbi in America should be promoting it and every interdenominational group and every pastor who leads, like Larry Hayward, who's over at my church here in Alexandria, has his best friend is a rabbi. I just don't know that people know about it yet. Does the press know how to promote?
Yeah, it's just I'm not a famous guy, and it's not such a niche book. I'm trying. I am. You're my biggest hit so far, as it were. So I appreciate it so much that you have me on like this.
Well, I'm going to keep flogging it, Howard, and we'll have you back. When does Hanukkah begin?
Hanukkah begins on Thursday night.
Okay, I'm off all next week. How long does it go for? 11 days?
8 days, but I'm if you ever want to do this again, count me in for Christmas.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because it is a great Christmas present. Howard, thank you. We will have you back. I didn't even touch like half of my stuff. I've got like half of my stuff wasn't used here, but
I can't believe you just made my day with you with that. It's such an obscure mention. It's so delightful to hear his name. So thank you for that.
Oh no, and I hope Mark's listening. It's a little early in California, but he's a dear friend, and if he ever shows you the Torah that they've got, it's a long story. It's a miraculous story how it ended up with him in Newport Beach. But ask Mark sometime to tell you the story. It'll give you a chill. Got to run, Howard. Be well. Bye bye.
Thanks.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Wasn't Howard Mortman great? His book is just terrific. When Rabbis Bless Congress. It ought to be in every American history class, every synagogue, every church with a library. It's just terrific. You cannot open it to any page and not be inspired. I hope you're also inspired by that song, Do You Know What I Know? Because I want you to know about Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree program. I ask you every day. And I'm going to break you down. I'm going to get you to thousands of children have already been served because of the generosity of this audience. And I know there are some of you who intend to give to Angel Tree because it means so much to these 370,000 children. And we could serve 500,000 if we raise enough money. It costs about $20 a kid. If we raise enough money, we can have people everywhere across the United States bringing presents to children with notes from their parents who are in prison on Christmas or before Christmas and opening the presents with their parents on social media. They get a note from mom or dad, they get the presents, and they get a Bible because of Angel Tree. It's a church patio project usually. That's where they get most of their money usually. But the church patios are closed, so these hundreds of thousands of children, oftentimes it's the only present they get, depend on Christmas joy for you. And you'll never see it, but he who sees all things will see it. So please head over to HughHewitt.com. At the very top, you will see an Angel Tree banner and give your best gift, please. Also got to check the market this morning. The big news of the day is that the coronavirus vaccine has begun to be distributed to the public in Great Britain. It is expected that today it will be announced the FDA, or tomorrow, the FDA will be approving the vaccine in the United States. 20 million doses will roll out. 20 million people will get vaccinated, and they're going to start with the health workers in every hospital that are taking care of COVID patients. They're going to move to the elderly in nursing homes, and they're going to move to the elderly, period, and people with comorbidities. It's a good plan. It's rolling out. Moderna will follow. Johnson & Johnson will follow. AstraZeneca will follow. People think it's going to be June. I think it's going to be by the end of March that everyone who wants a vaccine will have it. But then we're going to have to focus on persuading people who are suspicious of it. This was the worst part of the Democratic campaign this year, was throwing shade on the Operation Warp Speed. Now they got to walk it back and persuade people it's completely safe, which it is, and it will save lives, and maybe yours. That's most importantly. Maybe your family wants you around a long time, and you need to go get this vaccine. But the market is not cheered in Great Britain, although it's only down a quarter point. Germany is only down a quarter point. Hong Kong is down 3/4 of a point. Yesterday, the market was mixed. This is brought to you by Andrew and Todd, by the way. Andrew Del Rey, Todd Avakian. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. 2 times a day, they have me bring you an update on what's going on in the world of finance. And they finance your home purchase or the refinance of your home if you need to get money out. Interest rates have never been this low. The 10-year dropped yesterday back down to 0.93 because the news was so gloomy on COVID. It had gotten close to breaking the 1% barrier again. But that's good news for you if you have not yet acted. And I continue to urge you, the home building boom and the prices are out there, the surge in money. People are buying houses left and right. You need a pre-qualification letter. Andrew and Todd can give you one of those. They'll assess how much you can afford to buy. They'll give you a letter saying they'll back your mortgage up to that amount. But it begins with a visit to andrewandtodd.com. The business story of the day is that the Chinese market is launching a bunch of IPOs, trying to give Hong Kong a boost after a troubled year. I'm not sure that's going to fly. TikTok remains under the protection of a judge in the United States. Another judge said that President Trump's effort to ban TikTok is on hold. That's a terrible decision. We need to ban TikTok. TikTok is the vacuum of private info. Don't let your children near it. It completely, don't put it on your app. Do not put it on your phone. I mean, do not put the app on your phone. Don't go near it. It's a vacuum cleaner of everything about you. You got to realize that. In fact, I'm in favor of 2 laws. One, that every high-tech company has got to have a representative of the NSA or the CIA in every meeting of every board so that their algorithms all belong to the country's national security apparatus. And then number 2, that no one can collect personal data, period. You can't consent to it. You can't consent to slavery, and you ought not to be able to consent to the collection of personal data. It ought to be outlawed in the United States. That's my position. I'm sticking to it. And TikTok ought to be kicked out too. I'll be right back with Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee after this. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
People are fuming. Those who believe that Donald Trump is right, that the election was stolen, are angry at Bill Barr because they claim that he said there was no evidence. He didn't say there was no evidence. He said he's not seen any widespread evidence of voter fraud yet. This is a man who's had the president's back from day one. He did the summary of the Mueller probe, suggested that the president had been vindicated. He even used the word spy that the president has used and said his campaign was in fact spied on. He was reamed by the left for that. And in early last month, he sent out a directive. Let me read part of it for you, because this really infuriated the left, infuriated CNN, infuriated the New York Times, infuriated MSNBC. Hee-haw. And he said in this memo, probe voting irregularities. Normal protocol is to wait until the election has been certified. He said, no, don't wait. You hear any substantial allegations of fraud, pursue them now, to the point where the official who's normally in charge of investigating voter fraud resigned. He was so angry. And here's what the New York Times said. Attorney General William Barr, wading into President Trump's unfounded accusations of widespread irregularities, told federal prosecutors on Monday they were allowed to investigate specific allegations of voter fraud before the results of the presidential race are certified. Barr's authorization prompted the DOJ official who oversees investigations of voter fraud, Roger Pilger, to step down from the post within hours, angry over the change in protocol.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And I take you back to March of this year, when David Plouffe, Obama's former campaign manager, wrote a book called The Citizen's Guide to Defeating Donald Trump. And in it, everybody could see this, but he wrote on page 81, this election will come down to a block-by-block street fight to turn out the vote in Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and also Detroit. Now, he's working for Mark Zuckerberg at the time that he writes this. Suddenly, not long afterwards, Mark Zuckerberg is talking about pouring money into a small charity. He ends up giving $350 million to this charity and $50 million to another group. Now, the $350 that goes into state coffers, state election offices, and it dictates to Democrat stronghold cities how they're going to manage their election.
So hang on, let's stop here. Let's document everything. He gives $350 million to which organization?
Center for Tech and Civic Life.
Center for
Tech and Civic Life.
Okay, and the Center for Tech and Civic Life gives its money to state agencies. What happens next?
Local cities.
Local cities?
They start reaching out to Democrat strongholds, and they say, we got some money coming. You need to make a grant request for us. And then they tell them how to run their election. I'll take you into Philadelphia.
Please.
We obtained documents pursuant to court order that show communications between the city of Philly and also CTCL, the Zuckerberg charity there that he funded. And what we find out is they tell Philadelphia how many satellite offices you're going to have. We will buy the machines. We will pay the election officials. We will pay the election judges. You're going to consolidate your counting centers into these giant arenas, they say because of COVID.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Why, if these machines are capable of fraud, we have not had machines in the past that are capable of fraud. If suddenly we have the existence of machines that can be used in various ways to disenfranchise voters, what more do we need to say?
What I find
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by Senator Marsha Blackburn of the great state of Tennessee. Senator, good morning. How are you?
I am doing great, and I hope that you are doing well. I liked that little Christmas bumper music that you got going there.
All season long. But, I'm doing very well, Senator, because my Cleveland Browns went down to Tennessee and just roughed up the Titans big time. So, sorry to have you on and rub it in, but we just crushed the Titans on Sunday.
Oh, my goodness, it was not a pretty sight.
Well, I had to bring that up. Senator, you are both on Judiciary and Armed Services, and I want to spend the bulk of the time on the news that Lloyd Austin will be coming before your committee for confirmation. But before we do, on the Judiciary Committee, there are two circuit judges nominated, Thomas Kirsch and Rule Arias Marksuk, and there's one vacancy on the 7th Circuit. Do you expect to handle all three of those vacancies before this Congress goes away?
Yes. We fully expect to handle all these vacancies, and we are going to be on the floor today confirming more judges. We are going to continue to work next week to get these judges confirmed, and you can expect to see us close out with a full bench.
Now, I know that there isn't a nominee for the vacant 7th Circuit yet. I did have a chance to ask a senior White House official whether they intended to get one, and they said they were working on it. Do you expect to get a nominee for that?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
I certainly do.
That's a big relief. I hope it's Kate Todd, but I don't know that you would know that. Now, on the privacy stuff, big tech is in front of your committee. I don't know if you're on the subcommittee for big tech. Has the proposition ever been put forward, Senator, that they ought to simply be banned from collecting private data? We banned slavery, for example, in the United States. Why can we not just ban, and we ban substances that have not been approved by the FDA. We ban a lot of stuff. Why not just ban big tech collecting data on people? Because it simply is so intrusive.
And I have chaired the technology working group in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And that is a bipartisan group. We've looked at the issues that surround big tech. And one of these is the privacy, which is the data collecting that you're talking about, Hugh. And I've worked on the privacy bill since 2012. And finally, we have bipartisan support on this. And I don't know if we're going to get it finished up before this Congress ends, but I do expect early next Congress it will move forward because it does have bipartisan support. Here is what it does. It would have one set of rules for the entire Internet ecosystem with one regulator for your privacy. It would require that in order for big tech to data mine you, that they would have to have your opt-in or explicit consent in order to harvest your data and then to share your data. And of course, as you well know, the way tech companies build their net worth is by the number of eyeballs that they capture. And this data is an incredibly rich resource. But if you have the ability to say, you cannot data mine Hugh because Hugh did not give you his consent, then you've got to leave his data alone. And that will allow Hugh to secure his virtual you in the virtual space, his presence online, because that is your property, your private property is your search history and how you move around the internet. And you know what? It is nobody's business but yours.
Well, I worry about children, Senator, and they are not very aware of the consent that they have to give. They can't give consent, actually, under the age of 18. But they get these apps downloaded like TikTok that are simply vacuum cleaners. And I wondered, was it debated just a simple ban? Because they can make money through advertising. They can make money through a lot of different ways. They can charge for their service if it's Facebook. I just think data mining is insidious, absolutely insidious.
Well, I view it as, what they're doing is tracking you as you move around the internet. And all of these big tech firms, like your social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, all of these are encroaching on your freedom because they follow you. They don't just look at what you're doing when you're on their platform. Take Facebook, for instance. You do not own your list. It is serviced by a group called MailChimp. Well, if MailChimp hears from Facebook that they have blocked you, MailChimp will lock down your mail list. Now, that is exactly what they did to Women for Trump and America First, Amy Kramer's group. They locked it down, so she couldn't even say, this is where the March for Trump is going, this is where the bus is going to be. She could not communicate with her Facebook followers. So it gets into who owns the virtual you and who owns your relationships. And these big tech firms say that if you are on their site, they own it. If you're on Instagram, they can figure out who your friends are, and they can cross-market to the two of you.
Now,
it is incredibly invasive.
Senator, obviously slavery is a category of evil all itself, and the 13th Amendment prohibits it. But to own someone's data is to a certain extent to enslave them and to make them a portion of your company. And I hope during the rewrite of this and the hearings next year, people will just consider an absolute ban, because these companies will object, and they're powerful companies, but they should not have anyone's info. I've got to get, though, to your armed services role, because General Austin, the news is he's going to be nominated. I am curious what your response is to this news.
At this point, I have to tell you, I think that we need to figure out who is the president-elect first before we're running to who is going to be nominees in anyone's administration. And President Trump has his challenges that are taking place. They are looking again at Arizona. The results are going to be challenged in Pennsylvania. The legislature is looking at things in Georgia. I don't know if the governor is going to call a special session there or not. But everyone has seen the videos. They have seen the way these suitcases of ballots were rolled out from under tables. And the Georgia Bureau of Investigation needs to start talking to some people that are in those videos and saying, can you explain this?
Now, Senator, you should know, I absolutely disagree with that. I think those videos are doctored, and I do not believe, and I have told people in the White House, I do not believe any of these cases will succeed, nor will the Supreme Court take them, nor will the legislatures meet. I understand the need to maintain the right to sue, and he has that right, but he's lost every case. I don't see anything happening. So let's proceed with a hypothetical. Hypothetically, if either President Trump or President-elect Biden were to propose a former member of the military for whom a waiver would be necessary, such as General Mattis received, are you inclined to grant that waiver or not?
I am not inclined, Hugh, to talk about these until we have the Electoral College meet and we finish up this process. At that point, after we have the Electoral College meet, then we will have a proper president-elect and vice president-elect.
Okay, well, I can respect that. That's on December the 14th, correct? Is it December the 12th
Yes,
or December
it
the
is.
14th? And so after that time, you will then begin to refer to the president as president-elect. I mean, President-elect Biden as President-elect Biden if the Electoral College votes.
Whomever the Electoral College selects, then they will be, at that point, the president-elect.
I understand your position, Senator. Come back next week and we'll talk about Lloyd Austin, because I really do believe this is over, but I understand many people don't agree with me on that. But and I've told the president that, by the way. People don't think I'm dealing on different levels with different people. I'm just a lawyer. I'm just a lawyer, and I draw my conclusions. Thank you, Senator. I must tell people, I hate to disappoint my friends who want to fight on, but it ain't going to work. And there isn't a legal challenge left. I've told people I do not expect the Supreme Court to accept the Pennsylvania case for certiorari. I do not believe that. And I don't believe any legislature is going to meet to reconsider it. It's a terrible idea. It is a radical idea, as radical as expanding the Supreme Court. And as a conservative, I oppose radical measures. I just do. And I understand that some people want to wait and see if one of the Hail Marys works. I understand that. I don't fault anyone for wanting to wait and see. That's why they play, the NFL game, the Titans versus the Browns. The Browns were ahead 38-7 at halftime, and the Titans almost won. They didn't almost when they got within an onside kick. They had to recover an onside kick at the end. They had to recover 2 onside kicks, and they got neither of them. But it wasn't over till it was over because of a late fumble. So I suppose it's possible. It's just highly improbable. And we live our lives on probabilities. And so I would encourage all of you to be prepared, not to give up. If you want to fight the good fight, fight the good fight. Don't give up. But also don't be surprised when the Supreme Court says no thank you and when no state legislature meets, because it simply is, it's so radical. It's so extra constitutional. It's as bad as expanding the Supreme Court. And I am always going to prefer the Republic to winning short term. And the Republic needs the Constitution. The Republic absolutely needs the Constitution. We can't put one election. I think President Trump's going to come back and run in 2024, and I think he's going to win in 2024. And I encourage him to start running today. But I don't think 2020 is going to be the answer here. But I understand Senator Blackburn. Now, I also want to tell you, I understand that some of you don't know Angel Tree. If you're not a churchgoer, especially, you won't know it because it's a church patio operation, meaning that they get their volunteers, they get their donations, they get their supporters from church patios. But at the top of HughHewitt.com, you will see a banner for Angel Tree, because this year the church patios are closed. And so unless this audience and other audiences step up online at HughHewitt.com, there isn't going to be Christmas for hundreds of thousands of children. And there isn't going to be a note from mom or dad along with a present, and there isn't going to be a Bible. And that's what they do every year. So please, please, please be as generous as you can at Angel Tree. And don't forget, ReliefFactor.com. I may be sending some of this to Senator Cotton because I know he's out there putting up Christmas trees and cutting them down and all that kind of stuff. And so when you're doing that at this season, different muscle groups get used, different reactions happen, different aches and pains. And if you're getting older, that definitely happens almost without warning. When you all of a sudden the neck starts to hurt or the knees start to bark at you, that's where Relief Factor comes in. I take it in the first hour. Don't let Kurt Schlichter steal it tomorrow. Colonel Kurt is guest hosting for me tomorrow. Don't let him walk out of the studio with my West Coast Relief Factor supply. Hey, Dwayne in the Weather Center, meteorologist Dwayne, are you there? Please don't let Colonel Schlichter take my Relief Factor.
There hasn't been a relief factor in this studio in 100 years.
You know why? Because you.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Wokeness tends to be, in my experience, an upper middle class Caucasian phenomenon. If you look at positions on where trans prisoners should be housed or political correctness in speech and so on. So I've been lucky enough as a black guy in the Upper South to escape a lot of that, which is something I'm fairly glad for in terms of day-to-day life.
Very good. So now let's go to 1619, subject of your video. So the New York Times published this thing, which basically said, tell me if I have it correctly, and I have no issue with being corrected, that America was not really founded in 1776, but in 1619 when the first slaves came to the colonies, and it has been systemically racist ever since. We fought the American Revolution basically to keep slavery alive. Is that a fair synopsis?
Yeah, the 1619 Project's declared goal was centering slavery at, I believe their term was the very core of the American experience, and actually challenging the original founding date of the country. I mean, their materials very explicitly read, what if we imagine this was 1619? That's the date the first slaves arrived, and not 1776. Reality is much more complex, of course, than 1619's interpretations, which is...
Hold it there, please, Professor, because I must hold you there. And don't forget when we're talking about the complex reality as opposed to the 1619 Project. His video is up at PragerU.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The self-declared democratic socialist who hates capitalism, she evidently doesn't hate it that much. She's selling T-shirts that say tax the rich on them. You know how much the T-shirts are? $58. And the $58 does not include shipping and handling. I'm not kidding you. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, this radical tyrant who, cover of Vanity Fair and everybody, the left just loves her and she's so brilliant. Remember, she's the one that chased Amazon out of New York City. They were going to build a second headquarters in New York. It was going to bring, I think the number was 40,000 good paying jobs to New York. $30 billion in new revenue. She chased him out. She fought and won and chased Amazon away. Well, this week, the pre-orders are being taken America. I always love making sure that Senator Tom Cotton hears what real football songs are like. He's from Arkansas. They don't play it down there. Good morning, Senator Cotton. You know it's game week.
Yeah, I'm well aware of that, Hugh, and I suspected you'd inflict that song on all of us.
Senator Cotton, good morning to you. The news this morning is that President-elect Biden will nominate Lloyd Austin to be Secretary of Defense. Now, Senator Blackburn did not want to engage in that conversation because she said the Electoral College hasn't met yet. Would you engage with me on it, on whether or not Lloyd Austin will be a good nominee on the Senate Armed Services Committee?
Well, Hugh, first let me say that I respect and admire Lord Austin's service to our nation over 40 years in uniform. And I suspect that he might get quickly confirmed to many positions in a Democratic or Republican cabinet, for that matter. However, there are serious misgivings in the Senate about having another recently retired general become the Secretary of Defense. You'll recall that federal law prohibits any general who's been retired for fewer than 7 years to receive a waiver from the Congress to become the Secretary of Defense. Before Jim Mattis in 2017, it had only happened once before for George Marshall in the 1950s. There were several senators who voted against that. Many more senators have since expressed their regret for granting that waiver, given the state of civil-military relations inside the Pentagon and up to the White House. And one I would just highlight to you is Jack Reed. He is the senior Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, and when he voted for that waiver in 2017, he expressed reservation about doing so. He said it should be a once-in-a-generation moment, and that he would not in the future support another waiver for a recently retired general. So if they've already lost the senior Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, you got to think that they're at risk of losing a lot of other senators. And I can tell you this is not really an ideological or even a political point. It has nothing to do with General Austin's own views or records. It is from liberal Democrats to conservative Republicans in the Senate who share these concerns about civil-military relations inside the Pentagon.
Do you share those concerns, Senator Cotton?
Yes, I do, Hugh. To get down into the weeds a little bit about the Pentagon, there's 4 big organizations, 4 big families, 4 big types of units within the Pentagon. You have the services, Army, Navy, Air Force, so forth. You have the Joint Staff, where the services contribute senior officers and non-commissioned officers to the Joint Staff. You have the Office of the Secretary of Defense, which is primarily all the civilian offices. And then you have the combatant commands, both geographic command, like Central Command, which Lloyd Austin commanded, or Pacific Command, and then the functional commands, like Strategic Command or Special Operations Commands. I think what we saw under Jim Mattis was that the Secretary of Defense operated like a super combatant commander. He surrounded himself primarily with the people who had served him inside of Central Command, and I worry that another recently retired general who himself was a combatant commander might contribute to some of the same problems that we saw in the Pentagon in the early Trump years.
Now, Senator Cotton, I'm reminded of the vacancy after Justice Scalia died. The decision of the leader in the conference not to fill that was not based on Merrick Garland. It was based on the principle at the time that no opposing party had ever successfully nominated a justice during an election year when the Senate was not in the control of the same party. Would you prefer to see the vote on the waiver occur before the hearings on General Austin so that it is not specific to him? If in fact, I don't want people to in any way think that people like you are questioning his character or competence, but if there is going to be an issue about the waiver, shouldn't that vote come first?
Hugh, I think that's what we did in 2017. I know that we voted for the waiver on the Senate floor before we voted for confirmation. And a handful of Democrats voted against the waiver on principle, but then they voted for Jim Mattis. I could see some senators doing that as well, but obviously the waiver has to be granted, and I believe that's subject to the 60-vote threshold as well, as you've got to change a federal law.
That's right.
Your point is correct. What we're talking about here is not a reflection about Lloyd Austin or his service or his record or what his agenda might be as the Secretary of Defense. It is about the longstanding principle that we have civilian control of the military, and federal law has reflected that fact for 70 years, saying that we recently retired generals should not be the Secretary of Defense. We granted one waiver in 2017. Many senators and many people inside the Pentagon believed that was a mistake at the time. We ought not to repeat it. And Jack Reed said he wouldn't repeat it under any circumstances in the future.
So, Senator Cotton, we got less than a minute. I know you are opposed and you're intending to be the OMB director. I know Javier Becerra has got significant opposition for his attitude towards pro-life groups and other things. Are there other nominees? And now we have the Austin issue on the waiver. That's 3 controversies. Isn't that a lot of controversies for the vice president already, or the president-elect?
Don't forget Alejandro Mayorkas at DHS, who Obama's own inspector general found was responsible for selling citizenship to Chinese nationals on behalf of Democratic donors, Hugh.
So that's 4. It's going to be an interesting January. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you for joining me. Thank you, America. Kurt Schlichter is in for me tomorrow. I'll talk to you on Thursday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.